Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 10 of the Ark Podcast. This is the first podcast where I'm in the centre, which I'm really looking forward to doing with you guys. We've got a huge lineup of topics, both Australian and domestic, around the world in the political sphere. Firstly, why is the UK government paying farmers to not grow food for their own country? Venezuela descends into chaos as Maduro secures another election win. Australian premiers make a move to ban social media for those under 16 years old. Pew Research shows that half of progressive women under 30 have a mental health disorder. With more assassinations in the Middle East, World War III etches ever closer. Is Australia ready for it? New South Wales and Victoria prepared to face local elections in September and October this year. Anthony Albanese calls on Barnaby Joyce to resign for his speech at a rally. What really happened? 3 girls stabbed in the UK outside a yoga studio. British people call for justice on this. The Democratic Party squash democracy in their own party and pivot to Kamala Harris to save them. I'm really excited about this. This is going to be really cool. I'll tell you why. Not just am I in the centre, but for the very first time, Stephen, if you don't mind me stealing this, a guest of the show has sent over these mugs for the Ark Podcast, which I'm really excited about. We just need a 5th one for me. But we've got a phenomenal lineup of guests today, and we're going to be covering all these topics to help meander through them. On my right, I've got Ben Britton. Ben is a phenomenally informed veteran. He's in the security sector, specifically in defence, with hacking and encryption, and he's someone that I'm really looking forward to hearing his insights on many of these technical topics. As usual, I've got Dr. Stephen Shavura, Sky News contributor, senior lecturer at Campion College, who teaches European and Australian history. On my left, I've got a community organiser in Cessnock, Christine Stevens, who I'm really looking forward to hearing about how she's built a phenomenal community to get behind candidates both state, local and federal. And on the far left there, I've got Quinton King, who is definitely not far left in any kind of way. Quinton is a veteran candidate who has done very well in his electorate of Cessnock and the Hunter area, where he's helped build a community and fight back for our values. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really looking forward to this show. Not just because of the panelists, not just because of the topics, but we've reached a phenomenal milestone, episode number 10, and I wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone that has been supporting, regularly donating, joining the $5 cup of coffee a month army that we're developing there. If you want to join in support of the show, scan that QR code, screenshot it after this, and look at it in your photos. Just $5 a month really helps us keep the lights on and keeps everyone employed on the back end of things. But without further ado, the first story of the day, and this is an exclusive. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has called for Barnaby Joyce, the former leader of the Nationals Party and a sitting member of the Nationals Party, to be sacked over Bullitt's comments at a wind farm protest rally. And this is how the ABC News actually covered it, if you guys aren't sure about exactly the context.
On the weekend, Nationals MP Barnaby Joyce said,
"And the bullet you have is that little piece of paper, and it goes in that magazine called The Voting Box, and it's coming up. Get ready to load that magazine."
As you can imagine, that's gone down like a lead balloon because,
Former US President Donald Trump has survived an attempt on his life at a campaign rally.
Unfortunately for Barnaby...
You exist in the context.
And the context is currently... He's apologised.
Okay. Here we go. I apologise for using that metaphor. I've done it on Sunrise.
But the Prime Minister says he needs to go.
And here you have a guy going to a rally, calling for action, using analogies of guns, bullets, magazines, and goodbye to 3 members of the government.
Barnaby Joyce has faced a number of scandals. Some of them are pretty recent and pretty public. And the Prime Minister wants to know,
what does this bloke have to do to lose his job?
But Barnaby Joyce's colleagues in the coalition say that's a bit far.
It's not language I would have used, but Barnaby, as we know, does use colourful language. But when it comes to promoting social cohesion, everyone in their language and their words should be lifting the debate.
So what do you think? Should he have to go, or is an apology enough?
All right, Ben, tell me. What do you think? You were actually there at the protest. What really happened? What's the context?
Well, first of all, it's been completely taken out of context what he said, and they don't cover his full speech and how he held Labor to account for what they're doing, for ignoring the community, leaving the people behind. And what they also don't show is all of the working class people and locals and constituents who, after his speech, come and shook his hand and said, thank you very much for standing up for us. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for being here. And, you know, he really resonated with the people, the working class Ocker Aussies who were doing it tough because of the cost of living that Labor's put on them. And he really resonated with them because he used language that everyday people are using. And the metaphor he used, it's been taken out of context. It's the same as if you go into a debate and you're researching and you say, I'm just getting ammo for the debate. That's all it is. It's they've taken it completely out of context and just trying to smear somebody who really hit home with the locals and really got a very good response from the local people down there.
Christine and Quinton, I mean, you guys, you know, there are guns all over the place up where you guys come from in Cessnock and Newcastle. I mean, did this scare you?
No, not at all. Right. I think Albanese is just deflecting attention from himself.
Right, Quinton, tell me.
Well, they're asking what does Barnaby need to do to get sacked. I'd like to know what Andrew Giles need to do to get sacked.
Andrew Giles?
How many stuff-ups and immigration policy is going to be tolerated? Okay, he's been moved out of that portfolio now, but, you know, he hasn't been disciplined by the party. He's just been moved aside.
I'm glad you said that because we're actually going to come to the portfolio shuffle later. But Andrew Giles, you're 100% right. He gave us some huge problems with the Don Jr. tour, with the visa debacle. Yeah. But what I'm reminded of when I was listening to that particular podcast, and Stephen, you might remember this, when they were describing Trump in 2016, the establishment didn't take him. They took him literally rather than seriously. Whereas his audience, as Ben rightly pointed out, his audience took him seriously, not literally. And they shook his hand after.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the best insights about Trump, that, his supporters precisely saw behind what he was literally saying and saw the things that he was actually going to do, whereas his enemies completely ignored that and just focused on sort of the things that he literally said that most people knew that he didn't really mean. And in terms of the Barnaby Joyce, I mean, look, I will definitely say, you know, his words were injudicious. It was very Barnaby Joyce. I don't think it's such a great idea to be describing votes and ballots as bullets and things like that, especially, you know, less than 2 weeks after an attempted presidential assassination. But Albo is totally hysterical about this. I don't actually know who advised him to make such a big deal about this. Maybe it's from his own brain, but Australians are just not going to care about this. And I completely agree with Christine. He's just deflecting from his own failures right now. He's going badly in the popularity polls. Labor is trending down. He's just reshuffled his cabinet. And as Quentin said, he hasn't sacked one of the most incompetent ministers in Australian history, and easily the most incompetent immigration minister in Australian history. And this is just his way of pathetically trying to deflect from his own failures.
Just another point I'd like to raise as well, you know, look at all the MPs that turned up, you know, and look at, you know, we had Andrew Constance there, Liberal candidate for Gilmore, comes to every rally, comes to every event associated with the Renewables Futures and all the people down there, Responsible Futures and all the people down there who are opposing these wind farms. He's there every time supporting them. They put out invites to Stephen Jones. No answer. They put out invites to Alison Burns to attend.
These are all Labor MPs.
Stephen Jones is the Labor MP for Whitlam. Alison Burns is the Labor MP for Cunningham. And you've got Fiona Phillips down in Gilmore for Labor. All of them were invited. They've been invited to every single event to address the people, listen to their concerns, and, you know, actually do some real community consultation. Nothing. Crickets. They never come down, never speak to their constituents. And it just goes to show you how they just look down on the local communities they're meant to represent. They do not care about them, and their arrogance just shines through. I mean, at the very least, they could come down and try and push why they think it's a good idea and what it's going to bring to the community. They don't even do that. They completely ignore it. But this is what they do down there. Ignore the people, don't build them infrastructure, don't build them anything that brings them an opportunity, no jobs, no prosperity, keep them working poor. That's Labor's motto in the Illawarra. Keep the people working poor. That's their motto.
Is these particular wind turbines, are they like the ones up the coast where they're doing those floating ones in a whale migration zone, or is this different? It's the same.
It is. It's the same. And these things are in a depth of 300 metres.
Yeah.
They are a giant triangle floating platform that has a wind turbine on it that is about the height, roughly the height, of Centrepoint Tower. It is going to have chains that anchor it to the bottom to, big concrete blocks. These chains have to have slack in them for the seas that move around and the tides and all that sort of stuff. So they're going to have to be 5 times the length of 300 metre depth. Now, here's the thing. They do not have to produce enough chain for all of these wind turbines. I think they want to put 200 out there. They don't have enough manufacturing capacity for industrial chain in the world to actually fulfill the requirement. I think the last estimate was something like 30 years was what people have been saying it would take to build enough chain to actually even be able to anchor these things to the bottom. So from an engineering perspective, it's not going to work. So it's not about being with your pro-renewables or anti-renewables. What it is actually about is this is a terrible project that's going to waste taxpayer dollars. It's not going to work. It's going to be a disaster for the community, a disaster for everybody involved. That is the reason that you're opposing. It's because it's a poor project.
And the irony is that they're literally destroying the environment to possibly fix the climate. It's really madness when you think about it. I mean, they are literally doing things that if the right had done these kinds of things 20 years ago, they'd be jumping up and down and talking about how it's destroying the actual earth, how you're polluting the ocean, because these things leak a lot of oil as well, how it's going to be terrible for sea life and things like that. But if you just slap a climate change sticker on it, then suddenly it all becomes just fine. You can literally just destroy the environment for the sake of the climate, and also destroy the economy in the process. It really is a kind of madness that the West is going through at the moment.
And what's astonishing is about how experimental it is. On episode 1 of the Ark, we're up at episode 10 now. Episode 1, Craig Kelly was going after Chris Bowen for this particular project. And he was saying, why are we going for something that's way more experimental? There's only one case study of this working anywhere in the world and kind of working. In Europe, near like Norway, this is so experimental. The gale force winds we have from the east coast and sticking it in the middle of a whale migration path. Why? It's actually more experimental than nuclear. And it's way more experimental than coal. And, Cessnock being a massively, heavily reliant sort of area on that industry. Quinton, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've got a good friend, Mark Watson, over in Port Stephens that I think you might know, actually.
Yeah, good bloke, Mark.
Yeah, he's heavily involved in a campaign against the wind farms there, mainly because the community there opposes all the negative impacts on the environment that they feel it would have. It's... Port Stephens is a beautiful tourist town. And Chris Bowen was there telling people that this is not a debate. It's happening. So,
yeah.
Same as your other guest there. Sorry, I forgot his name.
Sorry, Ben Britton. I don't know what's wrong with these areas, either in Newcastle or in Wollongong. For some reason, they want to try these experimental things, as well as smart cities, as well as, all these sort of projects to surveil people. Is there a pattern there? Am I just sort of stabbing in the dark?
No, it is a pattern, and it's due to a heavily incompetent local Labor Party. It's obviously been a Labor stronghold for so many years, and the Labor Party didn't take, the community for granted. But because they're so heavily incompetent and inadequate in everything they do, you've got people who have made it to the positions of power who are completely unable to do the job. And as a result, they come up with ridiculous ideas that are not going to have any grounding in reality for the local community. I mean, one of the things that the council, that's a Labor council, one of the things they voted on was all of this artwork they put into the mall, the strip. Now, these are giant blocks of sandstone and palm trees on their side, and they strap one palm tree to a light post at the top. And you ask yourself the question, how many jobs does this bring to the area? In that same strip, that same mall, You have shops that have been vacant, some of them for 18 months. No one can put leases in there. They can't get businesses into the area. The foot traffic in the mall is dead. It used to be vibrant when they had a road in it. It used to be vibrant. And then you have the local mayor candidate, Tanya Brown, for the mayor. She's going for the mayor. Gets on the radio the other day, and all she talked about was, oh, the sun will rise, the moon will set. You know, I used to play in the creek behind the studio as a kid, and all this stuff. Nothing what I'm going to do for the community. All generic stuff. And then when asked what her greatest achievement was, I got a rainbow crossing put in the middle of Wollongong. Now, if you look at it from a really important perspective, cost of living, times are tough. People don't have jobs. Spending money on putting any kind of non-necessity like that into on spending the money on that, that's not really in the interest of the community. I mean, there's so many other things that could have been done with the money, but this is the kind of people we have going for positions such as mayor who have no idea how to run a business, no idea how to generate an economy, no idea how to bring jobs to the area and give prosperity to the people. That's what we have down in Wollongong and the greater Illawarra because of the incompetence of the local Labor Party down there.
Yeah, local council elections are coming up, if you didn't know, in Victoria and New South Wales, guys. So in New South Wales, they're actually coming up in September 14th, I do believe. And in Victoria, it's the 26th of October, which is the same day as the Queensland election for the state. So the reason why I've dragged Quinton and Christine all the way down here is because you guys have been phenomenal at running local, state and federal elections and organising. All politics is local. All politics is local. So in order to win state seats, you need some local councillors, and in order to win federal seats, you need state members. And one of the really cool things that I've heard about, you were talking about them chucking all of these, giving basically what the community doesn't want, which is sticking to roads, rates and rubbish. Instead, they're throwing these statues in, these rainbow crossings.
Oh, just another quick thing they wanted to do. They were talking about, the red bin collection, which is garbage. We'll make that fortnightly and give people smaller bins. And it's like, how does that help anything? And they're talking about it's a environmental thing maybe.
That's a new one.
That's the kind of things that you get out of the Labor-dominated council in there. Labor and Greens, I should say.
I haven't heard that anywhere. Guys, if you want to send me stuff like that in your local council area, you can email me at joel@thearkpodcast.com. Christine, you've been so effective at organising the community groups, of course, in conjunction with many phenomenal councillors, to the point that they actually removed the chairs in the council chambers, right? Because you guys were campaigning. What was that about?
Well, we launched a program in Cessnock called Save Wollombi Road because our council, our Labor Council, has decided that we have one of our roads, and I wouldn't say it's a small road. Wollombi Road starts at Wollombi starts at Wollombi and goes through into Cessnock. It's not a feeder road for the freeways. It's not a main road at all, but it is a road that's heavily used by about 25 to 30% of the Cessnock community. So the Labor government decided through grants, money and money that they were putting in, that they would make a 4-lane highway with 11 sets of traffic lights on less than 4 kilometres of road. And we're like, the whole of Cessnock doesn't have 11 sets of traffic lights. And on this one stretch of road that literally isn't the busiest roads in town, as I said, there's 3 feeder roads that feed into freeways that are going to stay single-lane roads, don't have the attention that our lovely Wollombi Road's going to get. So we asked them, what are you doing? And they said, oh, no, everybody's on board with this. I said, really? So we started to actually ask the community. We just put little letters in their letterbox saying, do you realise that they're making 4 lanes, which means you will not have parking? All of the local businesses on Wollombi Road will actually lose their business because there's nowhere to park for the clients. These are a lot of the elderly community. There's a pharmacy right there on Wollombi Road. The elderly people will just pull in, run in, put their script in, come out. They don't have to go all the way into town. It's much easier for them. That pharmacy is going to lose all of its parking. And they didn't even know about it. And yet the council, on one hand, is saying, no, they know, we've told them. But when we actually went in and asked them, they didn't know. So you've got one narrative coming from the council where everything's sweet, And then you've got the community who don't know. They don't know. And so once we started to ask the question, of course, the community came out enraged that they were going to lose parking. And you've got elderly people that have lived there, 70 years that aren't going to be able to come out of their driveways. And the council is so committed at completing their agenda that there's no conversation. In fact, it's worse than that. When we first started, we were told that we were giving them misinformation, but all of the information was straight from the council's webpage. So we could actually say, no, that's actually from your webpage. And we were astounded at how ignorant the councillors were. They didn't read the paperwork, so they didn't even know what what they were supporting in the council.
And they tried to bully you with the word misinformation.
Oh, conspiracy theorists, misinformation, all the usual propaganda that they wheel out when they're not winning. So, but it's ridiculous that they do that, because here we have a photo of the mayor on the front page of our advertiser, when we did have an advertiser, announcing that there's going to be 4-lane highway, and how proud he was of that. Are you kidding me? Do you not remember that photo op you did with the advertiser? Anyway, we took to the streets. We asked the council to provide us with a town hall so that we could come together and have a discussion about Wollombi Road. They refused to do that. They were asked twice to do that, to come. So we said, okay, we'll have our own town hall. So we got hold of an auditorium and we invited the local people. And we had, I think, 380 people came to our town hall. And we couldn't promise them anything because we're not the council, but we did promise that we would hear them. We would sit and have a discussion with them and hear their grievances. And that they came, and I think it was actually quite orderly. We did we invited all of the council and the executive staff of council to come. And I think we ended up with 2 current sitting councillors, independents, and 1 Liberal councillor came. And we just heard what the community answered questions, answered what we could answer, of course, that was the plans. And then the next we heard, we turned up at the next council meeting and we'd basically been locked out. They removed a third of the chairs. They said that our meeting was disruptive and angry, and it wasn't. I mean, I was the chair of the meeting. I didn't find it difficult to chair the 380 people. But what became obvious to us was that the council then increased their security. We now have security at Cessnock Council to protect them from us, I imagine. I can't see why else it'd be there. And the rhetoric began to, that meeting that you had, that unauthorised meeting that we had, I thought town hall meetings, anybody could have a town hall meeting and discuss the community concerns. It was unauthorised. From their perspective, and then they removed a third of the seating from the gallery. So we all arrived there, and I think we had about 100 people came that night. 130 people came to listen to what the council had to say, and we were told once the seats were filled, they locked the doors, and we were locked out of the council building for their security. They feared for themselves. So if you're doing a good job, guys, if you're actually doing the work that the community have voted you in to do, and you listened to your community, I actually heard them because they say they're listening, but I don't think they're hearing anything, then they wouldn't need to be fearful of their community. I don't know that anybody was ever threatened, Quinton, but they don't even want to come out and engage the community. And I think that's been the biggest eye-opener for us. The community felt as though they had a council that listened to them. And then the minute they put their hand up and say, hey, we want to have a discussion with you about this, there's no discussion. It's a foregone conclusion, actually. You're going to get it anyway. Oh, really?
Honestly, the lack of respect is astonishing to me. I mean, believe it or not, I've only been out like 9 years from school. And it's like, you guys have been paying taxes for decades. Like, you've been building this country.
Do you know, Joel, I think it's the arrogance that gets people the most, the arrogance of this community. They underestimate their community greatly. They really do. And I think that's going to be their biggest problem. They actually take the community for fools. So
sort of what you described sounded obviously like really bad town planning with the 4 lanes and the lights and obstructing elderly people access to shops and pharmacists. It just begs the question, why is the council doing this? Like, what are the forces behind this? Why are they going down this path? Do we know?
We've asked that same question many times. We have some development that what they're saying to us is at the end of Bellbird, say that's the halfway along Wollombi Road, they've got some subdivisions that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so from what we can gather, it's a bit of a grab for money from the developers to improve what they say is improving the infrastructure of our town. But if a town doesn't want, we have other avenues. The mayor of Cessnock is a Labor mayor, and he ran on a ring road. He would put a ring road in to take the people around the town so that they didn't need to upset the town. And, 4 years on, there's no ring road coming. I think he mentioned that we might get it in 16 years or something. Well, an election promise.
2041.
Yeah, when you're making an election promise, isn't that something that you're going to get in that elected period? I would have thought. But
So on the particular map, Christine, for those that don't know about this, and by the way, guys, the reason why we're spending time on this is a case study. Similar things happened in my area as well. So you're saying they basically promised to do a road around Cessnock, and they basically reneged on that, right?
Yeah, it was essentially going to be a bypass, 4 legs of a bypass, which looks like a ring, which is why they dubbed it ring road, right? From my opinion, right, what's going on there is it's poor infrastructure planning, like you said. It's coming from state and federal governments because we've obviously got federal government bringing in a lot of new migrants. I'm not saying the migrants is the issue in Cessnock particularly, but there's a massive population growth, right? So there's a lot of people after COVID, for instance, that moved out to the country, right? Our council has got their own projections of the population in Cessnock specifically exploding over the next 10 to 20 years, right? So they're saying that we really need these roads to go in because, they're already halfway through a development there. So to me, it's party politics where the federal government is implementing one kind of policy and then the state government is forced to get, hey guys, you need to build more housing, like housing is a political issue for us. And then the council is left with poor planning because what they're doing is they're actually building houses on the cheap without the proper infrastructure. And I mean simple things like proper access roads in and out of these areas, schools, hospitals, like all the basic things you need for any sort of a civilization to function. So it's become a local issue now. And like Christine said, we've actually ended up, so that went from, because there was that lack of consultation from the local council there, because it wasn't in the election year that time, we ended up organising a walk for Wollombi Road where all the community people come out. Sorry, I skipped one. We had the town hall meeting before. So townspeople come together with their pitchforks. What are we going to do about this, right? Anyway, we tried a couple of things, and to keep pressure on our council, we then had to walk for Wollombi Road. Hundreds of people come out. I was really stunned at the amount of people coming out in the community. Most of us didn't know each other until that day, joining forces to show the council, like, hey, listen, we need you to listen to us. And then after that, we actually had a convoy as well in protest of these 4 lanes going through there. The point of all of that was you've got someone in control of our LGA there that is just unwilling to listen to the people at all. They took every opportunity they can to minimise any sort of engagement with the community about what their thoughts were on, things that's going to affect 65 businesses along a busy stretch of road. Elderly people, there's one guy there that has a caravan he's going to get a traffic light intersection right in front of his driveway. So he's got to cross 4 lanes to get his caravan out, you know. So it's just, I don't know. I never intended to get involved in local politics until we saw 4 lanes coming to Wollongong Road and the lack of community consultation. And, you know, these blokes now think that I'm the devil of Cessnock because I just give them absolute hell. Yeah. And I won't apologise for it. You know, the thing that they don't understand is I don't care if I don't win elections. That's not my point. My purpose, my goal is out there to keep them on notice, to tell them that, hey, you're not doing right by the people of our LGA. Whether I win the election or not is irrelevant.
Yeah, it's actually a true voice of opposition.
Yeah,
that's absolutely critical.
It's the only reason I got involved.
Yeah, yeah. Guys, I as I mentioned before, there are many elections coming up on the East Coast and WA as well. So those dates again: New South Wales local elections, the 14th of September. The Victoria's local elections, 26th of October, which is the same date as the Queensland state election. There's a possible federal election in December, which we're hearing a lot of murmurs could be the first week of December that ends up happening. And then there's the WA state election on the 8th of March 2025 next year. I will be doing things for all of these particular elections to help guide you guys with who's running, how can you help out, and who to vote for in each particular area to back people like you guys up. But all politics is local. The reason why we're covering this, and it doesn't matter what country you're listening from, start building your community, start talking, finding the people that are like-minded, start meeting regularly, even if it's just once a month. It actually makes a huge difference in getting across the detail and getting across what your council's trying to do without you knowing. It's impossible to be across everything. I can't be across everything. That's why I bring such phenomenal guests onto the show that can tell me that they've halved the amount of times they're coming and collecting the rubbish. I never heard that before. It's astonishing. Anyway, guys, thank you guys so much for going through that. That's really helpful to understand exactly what's going on that front. And if you guys just want to see here, this is some of their candidates they're running in that particular area. They've got some phenomenal people on the council there that they're working together with, like Jess Jerd and a number of other candidates as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So over there, I'll just go through the picture. On the left there was Naomi Smith. Mm-hmm. She'll be running with me in my ward. And then we've got Daniel Watton. He's our mayoral candidate next to her in the black coat. The young guy next to me is Jack Franklin. He'll be running with Daniel Watton as well. And that sitting down is the mayor of Maitland, actually. We had a meeting with him last night, just, you know, to get a bit of a fresh perspective on ideas, because Maitland's going really well on a council level. He's an independent mayor, so we thought we'd engage with him a little bit and see how we can make our community, you know,
absolutely, yeah,
a better place as well.
And it's not pie in the sky stuff, guys. This particular council we're talking about, Cessnock, they almost won the mayoral race last time. They almost won it. This is one of the most encouraging councils I've seen in the country. I think individually I've given more talks in that area than any other area, but also the people are lovely. They're very, very welcoming. Anyway, guys, moving on, there are a number of other topics I want to get into. This next one is one that I think all of us on the panel are really, really concerned about. There are murmurs out of the UK which are saying, and some farmers themselves that are actually making the point that the UK government are actually launching programs to pay farmers not to actually grow their own food. Enough from me. Listen to what this farmer says from his own mouth.
We've been offered £2,500 to join a scheme for 3 years, but we don't supply you any food.
We're going to go hungry.
I am going to plough a field. I'm going to put spring barley in. I am going to get £440 off the government per acre, that when it comes to crop size, leave it rot in the ground. So I don't get no straw for the cattle. You don't get nothing for your bread, for everything we make, okay? But I can also plant bee mix, which is for birds and bees. I can plant wild bird seed, which is for wild birds. I can also be paid to buy a ton of wild bird seed like anybody puts in their garden for the birds, and drew it out on the ground once a week. I can get paid for that. Now my accountant says do it, because in doing that I've not got to buy fertiliser, which since the Ukraine war it's gone from £250 a tonne, to £1,000 a tonne. So in order to fertilise your food, I've got to buy fertiliser at £1,000 a tonne. So I've now got a crop that I don't have to spray, I don't have to send nobody out there with a tractor, I don't have to fertilise it, but I can just leave it in the ground and let it roll. And pick up my £440 an acre and go all over it again.
Crazy. What are your reactions to that, guys?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say, no one talks about every year all those farmers out there who take their own lives out of despair, and their children see it and they think, what future do I have on the land? What future is there for me? And these are the people who sustain us so our children can grow, and we need to be friends with our mates from the bush, because anybody who's ever had a friend from the bush knows that if you're lucky enough to have a friend from the bush, you can have one of the most loyal, hardworking and trustworthy mates that you've ever had in your life. And I just think that this is another kick in the teeth to farmers, and for too long, all over the world, in the Western world, farmers have been left behind. They've been neglected. I mean, and now because of things like the internet, we're seeing their hardships. There was a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, I think it was, a farmer who made a TikTok or an Instagram post or something like that, saying how he only gets $1.86 an hour. He works 12-hour, 13, 14-hour days every single day, doesn't complain, doesn't ask for nothing. He said, I'm not complaining, I'm not asking for nothing, but I just want to show you what I'm really having to do here. And then you look at what it's sold for in the supermarket, how much money they're making off it. I remember I heard something ridiculous back in the day. I don't know the exact figure now, but back in the day I remember getting told, farmers are getting 3 cents a pineapple, and then they're selling it for $3 in the store. Why is more money not going into the farmer's pocket for what they produce to sustain us, and leaving all this food to rot? I mean, no one's looking at that from an ethical point of view. How can that be allowed? How can someone pay to allow food to just be destroyed, and when there's so many people in the world who need food, and there's starving people in the world? And let's cut it. If you look at the supermarkets here, now you look on the shelves, we're seeing foreign fruits, foreign vegetables, and all these imported food. And you ask, why are we importing food when we've got the best garlic, we've got the best oranges, we've got the best of everything? And yeah, sure, some might not be in season, that's why they import some of the stuff, but some of the stuff's all, they can freeze it, there's lots of things they can do. They're more likely to sell it overseas to China. And then you look at a supermarket like Coles, they sell all the good stuff to China, and then we'll undercut SPC in diced peaches, but we'll use Chinese peaches. How does that help Aussie farmers? It's not. It's because they want the best peaches for China, and then we get the dud peaches that they don't want, And for too long, people have neglected the bush, and the Australian government has not done enough for the bush. And how long is it, and what is it going to take before we, really start putting in an effort for our farmers and giving them a fair go so their kids can grow up and have a great life? I'll never forget, I've got a family down in Victoria on the farm, right? I'll never forget this doing Christmas. And I got told, I was only young, I got told, these kids are coming over, you need to be real nice to them, be friendly with them. I go, okay, sure. And their dad just killed himself, And then I'll never forget this. The auntie gave him a card, and it was $20 inside, and this kid thought he'd won the lottery. It shows you how tough they were doing. He got $20 and he was wrapped. And I was so upset. I thought, how, this is so bad for this guy, And I was only young at the time. I was, probably 12 years old, 13 or something like that. But I just thought, that's not fair, I mean, these people work hard. They work a really, really hard job. And the best stock in this country, if you go anywhere in the country, the bush, anywhere in the rural area, the best, most Aussie stock in this country comes from the bush. They're some of the best people, and they're the backbone of this nation. If you look at the Anzacs and all the Anzac legacy, that's where it's from. All those people, the backbone of the country, You know, true Aussies.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense when you hear the stories about the Anzac soldiers, like the light horse. It's like, well, they were just from farms.
That's right.
They were just good stock. And you reminded me of the back in 2019, I had friends visit me from Victoria. They were farmers, generational farming, and they were here for a funeral for another. They said to me, "Oh, another farmer committing suicide." Like, it's just the norm. It's just like, how are we allowing this to happen? And you're right about this monopoly. Maybe I'm using the wrong word. Maybe oligopoly between Coles and Woolies. The idea that this farm gate price that's negotiated, the price that these farmers pay. You gave the example of pineapples for 30 cents or whatever, and that them being sold for $5-6 or whatever it is at Coles or Woolies. Why is it? What's going on there? And again, this isn't me going after Coles or Woolies. I just want to understand why. I want to actually set up an app, if I have the opportunity to, or some kind of website where farmers can send us anonymously the farm gate price they're selling to these organisations, and then we are finding exactly what they're being sold at around the country.
Well, that's right. And if you look at the milk, like they went after dairy farmers. You know, well, let's buy our own milk. Let's undercut all our competition in the store and put them out of business. And you look at it and go, how unethical is this practice?
Yeah.
This is not you're not talking about a T-shirt or a car or something like that. You're talking about things that are sustaining human life in this country. You cannot allow that to happen. And it's time for governments to step up, put their money where their mouth is, and legislate against this stuff. Legislate for fair pricing. And I'm talking at the gate. The farmer gets way more in their pocket for what they produce, but the end sale to the consumer can't be an extortionate price. And I'm not talking about, taking away free market. We're not about that. You always got to have free market. But if you do not have regulations to protect farmers, you've got to have something there as a safety net for them. And also another safety net you've got to have funds for them for when crops don't work, when they have droughts, when things unexpected happen. And people from the bush are very proud people, very hardworking. They don't want a handout. They'll never take a handout. But this isn't a handout. This is their money that they've paid in tax over many years, and all the hard work they've done feeding our kids and feeding our country. We should be going after them and going, we've got a fund here for you. If you have a bad crop, we'll still make sure your farm's taken care of, you still got money in your pocket, and you looked after the community of people looking after our farmers,
My question is, what sort of government uses our taxpayer dollars to fund our farmers to not farm so that in 3 years' time we have no food? This is our government that we're paying our tax dollars to ensure that 3 years down the track we do have grain stored to eat. The joke's on us. It really is. The joke is on us that they're using our taxpayer dollars to pay farmers to not farm. This world is just bizarre.
Yeah, you're right about that tragic element that of the Australian farmer. I mean, Australia was built on the back of farmers, and everything Australia has ever sort of put its hand to in terms of farming, it has more or less produced the best in the world, whether that is wool, whether that is fruit, whether that is vegetables. Everything our farmers have done have not just been world class, but pretty much the best that you can get anywhere in the world. They're a part of our they're as much a part of our heritage and our legacy as are the Anzacs. And what is happening to them, it really is, it's a national disgrace, and it's an act of sort of national treachery on the part of political parties that have allowed things like that to happen. Political parties that allow our farmers to go under, putting us at the mercy of massive global corporations who own millions of acres of tracts of land in other countries from where we wind up getting our fruit and vegetables now. And you all see it at the supermarkets. You buy a nectarine or something like that, and you know it's not going to ripen because it was frozen at one point. It's come over, and basically it's hard when you get it, and after about a week, it's basically rotten. It's not the only thing that governments have allowed to happen in that respect. It's also the housing prices issue. It's also the immigration issue. These are literally acts of government treachery. How does it happen? I think there are many ways that it happens. I think political parties are beholden to massive donors who are themselves funded by these massive global corporations who own all this land, who are essentially trying to gain monopolies on everything. And very often the language that they use to justify moving farming out of one particular country to elsewhere is they'll say, oh, it can be done more sustainably and more efficiently elsewhere. So it kind of becomes linked to the climate hoax. And that the idea of sort of the climate crisis has such a groupthink pull and domination among national elites that it's almost irresistible and it's almost impossible to say, well, hold a second, wait a second, what about our national industry? The response is always, oh, we're in a global crisis though. Now, how can you respond to that? So, I mean, that's part of the problem. But as sort of someone who's interested in history and politics, what really worries me is that once our farmers lose the capacity, well, basically, once we lose our farmers, we become entirely dependent on other countries and on global corporations to get the things that we need literally to live. We become essentially vassals of global corporations, and it's already happening now. And if you want to read something fantastic on this, Joel Kotkin, an American demographer, has written on this, and he says we're entering into a new feudal age where basically what is happening is we are becoming peasants again, we are becoming vassals, we're becoming peasants again, owning less and less and less, and the things that we need are things that we can no longer grow ourselves or get from people from our own, sort of brought up in our own country. We become reliant on faceless, massive corporations over whom we have absolutely zero control. That is where, in worst case scenario, we're heading.
Yeah, sorry guys, I got some scatterbrain shots I've got to fire out just real quick. First off, tyranny of the majority. If you look at this map here, this shows you exactly the problem with this, because the farmers obviously rurally based. We've got about 8 or 9 rural electorates in New South Wales out of about 40. So the other 30 that are there are all in inner Sydney right here, which is all zoomed in right here. This is a problem because they will never be able to get enough votes in order to actually do what they need to do. So if we don't actually start making more states, for example, if we don't actually keep the farmers in mind and hear their consultation, the people in the city where it's trendy to act as if they live out of reality and they don't actually have to listen to what the farmers are saying, the people that keep us fed. You've never been on the farm, most people in the city. You have no idea. Now, I was very lucky. I went to a school where there was 30-40% of the schools were boarding students from farming backgrounds. Because I went to King's, and I saw these farming guys. They'd come from all over the country, and it gave me a healthy dose of the perspective of Aussies. Of course, some in the cities as well. But the other thing is, these generational farms, they're generational farms because they're sustainable in their nature. Whereas they make them sound like these farmers that they're just, raping and pillaging the land. It's like, well, then there's nothing to hand your kids. These are like 8 generations of farming sometimes. And the last thing I'll say on this, Australia has one of the worst monopolies in the world with Coles and Woolies. One of the worst when you compare it to other countries, even America. And the problem with that is if we don't work out how to actually have a truly competitive market, because the left will say, the progressives will say, well, this is capitalism's fault. It's like, no, this is not capitalism. This is like a monopoly that is entrenched by government policy as well. Anyway, there's a lot of things I want to do on this particular topic, guys, but I could talk about this forever. I would love to do some kind of a project. I've got the guys to do it. I just lack the information. If you could send it to me, what farm gate price are farmers sending their produce to Coles and Woolies? I have no doubt many of them will have some kind of an NDA. That's the challenge with these things. But I think it'd be fascinating. I think it'd be really fascinating. Anyway, moving on, I have a really interesting topic which we haven't talked about specifically, being digital ID. So in New South Wales and South Australia, the premiers are getting on like best mates. They want to bring in some kind of social restrictions for kids under 16. They actually want to raise the social media age for social media use. So in this particular story, Chris Minns and the Premier of South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, they're meeting in this week to actually talk about how they're going to bring this in. However, there's a lot of challenges surrounding how they actually institute that, how they verify people's ages. Ben, this is actually your area, and you'll be speaking on this on the 6th of August, right?
Yes, I will be speaking at this at Parliament House on the 6th of August. In relation to the digital ID and age verification, I'm currently also writing up a big report on this and some policy advice on this, because this is something that's trying to be pushed by people who are clearly technically illiterate. They don't understand how the internet works or how anything to do with big tech works. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to just score some browning points with the community. They speak to parents. What's your concern? Oh, my kid spends too much time on social media. Oh, okay, I'll ban that for you. That's actually what's happening. And we had a really interesting thing already happen with Pornhub in the United States. Now, Texas passed at state level a bill to ban Pornhub. So what happened? All Texas-based IP addresses for the internet, Pornhub is banned. So when you go to Pornhub for a Texas IP, it will come up with a page stating why it's banned and how it's against freedom of speech. Change your IP to California, you view the whole thing works as normal. So all that's going to happen here, say New South Wales and South Australia ban or put some sort of restriction and somehow convince the social media companies to comply, because they don't actually have to, then all kids are going to do, change your IP address to Perth, change your IP address to Queensland. They can do this in 2 seconds by downloading an app, clicking a button. That's how easy it is to change your location. They can go to a web browser, type in free proxy, it'll come up, they type in a URL, bang, they go straight to whatever they want from a different IP address. So this is where they're at. They'd have to convince the social media companies to change it. But here's how it's going to fail. Kid wants to make a social media account, turns it on, goes to a US IP address, creates an account, then that account's registered in the United States. Does not fall under Australian law. So then even though the kid lives in Australia and is accessing the social media account from Australia, what's going to actually occur is it's not going to be pinged by any social media company because it was registered in the United States. It's the United States. It doesn't fall under the laws. And this is what a lot of people in Parliament don't understand, especially the people who are the current ministers, and we also see state government current ministers. They do not understand that wherever the data is stored, that's where the law applies. So if Facebook really, or X or any other social media company really gets pressured, all they have to do is go, okay, you want me to change for your laws that you've just passed? I will now take my entire business, all of the servers and all of the data from your country, and I'll just put it back in the United States, or I'll put it in Singapore, and then I'll just funnel it to Australian IPs, which they can easily do, and bypass the entire thing. You take me to court, gets chucked out because it's Australian law does not apply outside of Australia. So this is why the whole system is just not going to work. And the question comes, how are you going to verify the person's age? I mean, Google already has this. They've already rolled out an age verification system that exists in Google Play Store. So make a new Google account, go to the Google Play Store, attempt to download an app, right? That's any kind of age restricted, like so dating apps now, so age restricted. Download that, and it will actually then come up and ask for age verification, be it through credit card, taking a selfie, which runs it through a computer system to analyse your features to see if you look old enough. And the other one was, I believe, phone number, which all of these are bypassed in 2 seconds. And I actually was testing it, part of what I do with my cybersecurity stuff and all that, and I was testing it, and I was able to bypass the age verification by taking a photograph of Andrew Tate off a monitor. That's how simple it was to bypass it in literally 2 seconds.
Wow.
So the whole concept here that they have, and even if they were to bring in digital ID is actually easier to forge than a physical ID. And I know this, I used to bounce top 10 most violent venue front doors. When I used to run the front doors, underage kids stopped coming because they know that I'll get them, because I just know what to look for in a fake ID, and I was really good at it. So I know even the really good fakes, and that wouldn't happen that often. Normally it's just they're impersonating, they're using someone else's ID. But the digital IDs, they were starting to come out back then. And I'd always refuse them. The kid would be puzzled, why are you refusing? Because anyone can forge a digital ID. And in actual fact, in 2022, a security researcher was able to back up his entire phone to the iCloud, take out the actual file that was the digital ID, decrypt it, because it only had a PIN number on it. It was decrypted in 2 seconds. Change the actual name, the age, the address, re-encrypt it, re-upload it to his phone, and it showed up as a real New South Wales digital driver's licence. He scanned the QR code, it even worked for the police. And that just shows that the entire system is flawed, and it's just simply not going to be possible. There are other methods that they could go down, other avenues that they can go down to protect children online that are less invasive, require a hell of a lot less effort because you don't have to get all these giant tech companies on side. I mean, one of the things that if they really want to protect children online, why aren't they providing parental control tools for the really little kids? But also, why aren't they going to the social media companies? Let's meet halfway. Let's create a sandboxed environment or a sandboxed version of Facebook for kids under 16. So then it congregates. It's orientated towards in the algorithms and everything. There's wholesome stuff in the algorithms. The kids are getting shown good stuff. It's a safe environment. You know, you can put a parent on the account so the parent sees everything. They can see if a kid's added a new person or someone's messaging them who they don't know. Or you can even set up so unknown people can't message your kid. So that takes away predators being able to add your kid, message your kid. There's so many things that we can do that don't require some sort of age verification system. The only reason it's really being pushed, everyone thinks it might be a sinister thing, you know, like they're trying to control people, whatever. I'd actually argue that it's probably not that. I'd say what it actually probably is more likely to be, a bunch of technically literate people preying on a bunch of technically illiterate people who make decisions. And they go, hey, I want a government contract making apps, making all these very sophisticated things that aren't going to work anyway, but you pay me lots of money over a very long time for a contract. And I think that that's actually the case, yeah.
A few things before I get the rest of the panel's take on this. Just from reading the article, there's other reasons why they're saying they're doing this. First and foremost, they're saying it's fueling, social media's fueling extremism and misogyny. I will make the point that Anthony Albanese did actually blame the shooting of Donald Trump on misinformation. On top of that, Peter Dutton also backs this particular approach as well. In the first 100 days of government, he actually wants to bring something similar in. I really hope that many people in the coalition hear what you're saying, Ben, because I think it's a great point.
Well, I think Peter is very adamant about protecting children. I mean, he's an ex-police officer, and his heart is in the right place. He wants to protect kids online. He knows, and he has seen in his career exactly what happens to children, how they're exploited, and the horrors that happen. As a police officer, he would have seen that, and he would have known all about that sort of stuff. So his heart is in the right place. He wants to protect kids, and he is making a commitment to make sure that he protects children. The method of how we get there, there's lots of different methods that you can get there to do that, but that's where his heart is. His heart is in the right place, wanting to protect children, especially online, and I think it can be achieved. We can protect children online. It will take some effort to do so, and it will take a lot of hard yards and maybe a bit of out-the-side-the-box stuff, but we can do it. We can protect children online. I've always said one of the things that they should be doing is developing parental controls, but really good parental controls that they can install on a kid's phone that maybe make it lock they can't download apps. Have a system where everything they view online is filtered. So all the bad stuff is filtered out. And you can even get to the point where eventually there'll be AI overlays that are developed that will see an image that's, gore or some sort of violent image or violent video, and it will actually just put a block over it till the parent checks it and sees if it's all right, And that sort of stuff for kids. I mean, that way it's an autopilot thing.
There's actually something like that. There was an app a few months ago, you might have heard of this, where it would, rather than show OnlyFans girls, or when you're on Instagram, you see girls in bikinis and whatever, it put them into that dressed them up.
Yeah.
It dressed them up to make them look like traditional wives. And I thought that was the funniest thing at the capability AI could do. Stephen likes that.
What's not to like? It's beautiful. My students at Campion would love that as well. They're all trad rads, rad trads, whatever you call it. I would just say two things on this. I mean, I think they really let the cat out of the bag in some ways when when they said, and by the way, we've also got a problem with extremist rhetoric and all sorts of other bad things on social media. So this will be actually a really good opportunity to be able to clamp down on that. Essentially what they're saying is we're going to clamp down on political speech. And so I think, in some ways, one of the cats in the bag was let out. And we've got, Julie Inman Grant, Karen, who's head of the E-Safety Commission, and she actually goes around censoring, for example, anti-trans ideology tweets and things like that. There is definitely an appetite among many people in Canberra to censor political speech that they consider to be, and not just political speech, religious speech that they consider to be both dangerous and harmful. And that's one reason I am very, very skittish about granting governments powers to be able to, say, ban social media or ban certain kinds of social media for minors. But the second thing I'll say is, look, I do, and look, I hope I'm not being naive, but I do tend to agree with those, and Ben sort of alluded to this, that think that ultimately this is something that needs to fall mostly on the shoulders of parents. And an interesting thought experiment might be, let's say tomorrow, just imagine this, go with me here. Imagine that tomorrow it became legal for minors to drink and for minors to smoke. Would parents suddenly start allowing their children to drink and smoke? Now, some would. I will absolutely admit that. But I would wager that the overwhelming majority of parents would not allow their children to smoke and to drink. Why? Because they know it's not something that they should be doing. And the point I'm trying to make is that when parents sort of know that there are things that their kids shouldn't be doing, they can actually stop them from doing it. For example, when I was young, and I think they're still legal, BB guns were legal. But hardly any of my friends had them. Why? Because their parents wouldn't let them get them. And I guess the point I would want to make is, like, parents can exercise some control over what their kids do. And I think that we should be looking first and foremost at how to help parents enforce rules about social media to their children rather than straight away looking to the state. Because as soon as we outsource our parenting to the state, it'll start by treating children like children, but very quickly, like Julie Inman Grant, it will start treating all of us like children.
Absolutely.
No, I'm with you. Parenting should be with the parents, not with the state. So I agree. People should be monitoring the children, what they have access to on the internet. It's an issue that starts at the home, actually, what the children are allowed to have access to. I'm with you, Steve. Keep it away from the state. Did you have something?
No, I agree with everything you say.
Yeah, I think, just another point to note is with parental controls, I tested out, I won't say which company, but a very reputable company's parental control system. I tested it out on a phone. I was able to bypass it quite easily. So for a kid, they're still going to be able to bypass it. What we need is to set up an app that parent could download, put on their child's phone. They can then log in and see, or have a portal. They can see, what their kid what websites a kid goes to and all that sort of stuff. They can actually block Facebook completely if they really want to. But it's foolproof. The way you do it is it has to be a firewall on the device. You put a firewall on there, and it actually, in the firewall rules, it blocks certain websites. It doesn't matter what protocol they're using to try and get out of it. It's going to be filtered out. So that's one of the things to consider. If they're punching out through a tunnel, then yeah, sure, it's going to bypass the firewall. But that's you put in there by default that you can block certain types of connections going out and all that sort of thing, which would actually make it so the device is locked down and the kid can't bypass it. And what they would actually do is, parents who are super busy, they don't have time to learn the tech, they don't have time to monitor what their kid is doing, but if they have an app they can put there that gives them peace of mind that no one's going to be able to contact the kid, they can't download and install a new app that could potentially open up predators to messaging them, all their SMSs get overlay. So if they get a number that's not in their contacts, for example, it notifies the parent. Same with the phone call. You could even set it so it blocks SMS and blocks phone calls from unknown numbers that aren't in the contact list. Because some parents might like, only the family should be calling my kid. So that's the kind of things they could bring in, and it's in there. It cannot be removed as an app, and it basically locks down the device. Now, there's certain features that were in it, like being able to track the location for safety purposes and things like that, but I'm a little bit adamant to do that to children because of the simple fact, yes, it would massively help parents if they know, hey, my kid is, off in the bush somewhere and it's a school day, but I think about the child's mental health, being watched, being monitored. You do not want to have a situation where a child is growing up in the world, Big Brother's watching me, I'm being tracked. That's not what we want to do for our kids. But if you do it the way I said with the, taking away the content, monitoring the content, so the child cannot bypass it, cannot be exposed to the bad content, then that's going to be a huge gain for parents, but it's not invasive and going to ruin the kid's life or make them feel like they're being watched. They'll actually feel like, hey, I'm being looked after,
Absolutely.
What about a cultural shift in terms of seeing an iPhone as a kind of rite of passage in the same way that we do, say, alcohol, cigarettes, owning a car at the age of 18, right? Rather than giving 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds iPhones, give them dumb phones. And the iPhone can be something, and this will just be hopefully something that sort of just weaves into the culture that you get when you're 18, when you've got the kind of mental stamina to be able to withstand when someone mean tweets about you. Yeah. I mean, there needs to be a cultural shift about these things. As a historian, I know that in the 19th century, in some primary schools, kids were given beer. It was just a way to give them the calories that they needed for the day. But culture sort of shifted on, and now that is sort of impermissible. And you could maybe have the same kind of thing. Like, we're in a culture where kids have iPhones, but culture can change if parents, really are determined to drive that cultural change.
I'm certainly with you there. I think, with alcohol, the introduction of that being one of the best things to use as a case study. With Aboriginal communities, when they first came across alcohol, they couldn't get enough of it. They'd never been exposed to it. It wasn't in their genetics. What would take many beers for Europeans to get drunk on, it took a lot. Took a lot less for Aboriginal communities to get drunk on. Similarly, with social media, I fear for young men, and I'd have no problem talking about this. I once had a problem with pornography, just like Graham Hoodie had a problem with pornography when he was a younger man. I overcame that, but the problem is the kids that have it now, it is targeted. It is targeted at a crazy rate. They are using AI. They are using an algorithm that especially picks every single attribute that you like in a woman, every single attribute, and it crafts it, often fakely. It's not even that, there's a girl that really exists out there. Exactly, an AI they've created. And it's like, you guys don't stand a chance. This is like the Aboriginals when they first came across alcohol. And I really worried about that. And again, I'm not smart enough to answer this question, but it reminds me of the book, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt, where he talks about the introduction of social media and the massive spike in young men and young women's suicide attempts and actual successful suicide attempts. And there needs to be a huge discussion about this. Do we introduce them too early to it? Do we put it off and do it at a certain age? I don't know. With alcohol, I was very lucky. My dad introduced me during the safety of the home, a few scotches every few nights, and it was at a relatively young age. But that was in the safety of the home versus getting it at 18 and getting absolutely sloshed and making a fool of myself and potentially killing myself in some cases. And so I don't know. I think there's a huge opportunity to have a chat about this and get on the front foot. But Ben said this before the show. Where is the money in this? Where's the money in actually getting ahead of some of these issues? And actually, where's the grant money? It doesn't seem like it's being wielded that way.
I think as well, it's a big issue because if you look at pornography, for example, one of the reasons why it has got so much more heavy exposure, especially to young people, children even seeing it, is because there has been a large push for free pornography that does not require a subscription or a credit card. And you're talking 20 years ago. Internet porn's been around since the internet began. But 20 years ago, pornographic websites you could not access if you didn't have a credit card. And there was free pornographic websites, but they were very, very poor quality, very, very low quality. Now, the paid porn sites are getting put out of business by the free porn sites because they're providing the same service, full-length, high-definition movies for free, and anyone can access it. All they do is go to the URL, and that is the problem because it's become an epidemic online, and it's being pushed everywhere, and it is destroying society. It's destroying relationships. You see young women thinking that they have to perform like this and do these certain things or they will never be able to get a partner. And it's the same for men. If I don't look like that or have that, then I'm not going to be able to get a girl. No one will like me. But it's also normalised things that aren't normal human interactions. And that is one of the most concerning things about it. It's warping the minds of young people. And if you look at particularly young men, lots of studies have been done on this. If you take a young man who's, say, 7 years old and they start watching pornography at 7, by the time they're 18, 20 years old, what actually ends up happening, it gets to the point they need more and more hardcore pornography to feed their addiction and their desensitization. Then they start to fantasize about being the actual girl in the film. And then they push to wanting to become a woman. And that's where you look at a lot of these mental health issues rise. Yeah, that's one of the studies that they've done. It starts to push them into transgender desires. First, it starts with wanting to see transgender people, meet transgender people themselves, but then it moves to, I want to be the woman in the film. Because there's nothing left at that point. They've seen every type of pornography there is, every type of extreme. They can't feed the addiction anymore. They can't get the high. They can't get the dopamine hit. So then they have to go to the next level, trying more and more extreme things. And this is why we see extreme, unrealistic sexual practices and desires in the community have risen massively over the last, say, 40 years, is a direct result of pornography. If you look at Papua New Guinea, look, I speak Tok Pisin. I've done a lot of study on Papua New Guinea. And one of the things that we did when I studied in Defence Force School of Languages, and one of the things we did when we did it, was we learnt about the problems of pornography in the community there. They had a huge problem with pornography. The rapes went through the roof because what you'd have is a bloke in the Highlands would be sitting in a hut, reading the pornography, gets obviously aroused, sees a young girl walking past, doesn't even think twice, goes out and drags her in the hut and assaults her. That's what was happening. So the government banned pornography. Sexual assaults dropped significantly. So that's the kind of thing, if you look at it, it's really changed the whole of society in the way it works. But here's the problem. Because it's on other countries' servers in other countries, you'd have to get them to legislate and crack down on it. But then all that's going to happen, they'll just move to the next country and the next country, next country. How do you shut it down? How do you stop it? The way you're going to have to do this is you have to do it on the host level, so the computer level. So each individual device, as I said with the app, you have an overlay that stops it. So you don't want your kid to see pornography, the AI overlay will stop it. It sees it, detects it, blocks it, can't be seen. And that's the kind of thing then, doesn't matter what's out there in the world, you're protected and shielded from the world. So that's really realistically a better option.
Absolutely, and I think we need a rediscovering of ourself, rediscovering of Stoicism and the Christian values which help us destroy these values, these desires. Because I'm going to do we could talk about this forever, and I think there's a lot of young men that are listening to this right now and like, yeah, Joel, how the hell did you end that desire? Simple, I didn't. I recognized that if I'd keep doing this, it's going to take my creative energy. It's actually going to stop me from going and doing great things into the world. And it is a control vector. It is a control vector. This is like your creative, the X factor in you. And that urge to actually go and be creative and go and conquer the world, that is what you're giving up. That is why they want you to do that. But I'm going to get Graham Hood here in the future. We're going to do a dedicated study on this. Him and his wife have been doing some phenomenal work with regards to pastoral care on that and marriage counselling. So I want to get them in Sydney. They're not in Sydney. That's the only problem. But we will come back to that topic. Looking overseas now, can I just say I'm really enjoying this discussion with you guys. We have a phenomenal array of skills here. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, we're seeing a situation where Maduro has clinched the election win there by what the people think is a completely fraudulent election. Now, why do they think that? And this is some of the clips that I've found online on X. Once again, X is the place where you can find the information up to date. And Elon Musk is retweeting so many things. He is so onto it. I'm actually really impressed, and I've seen his evolution. Go follow me on X at Joel Jammal. You can see a lot of these things that I just retweet without any comment, and you can get a really good feed every day. Turn the notifications off because there's way too many posts. It'll keep you up at night. But this is a sort of post that we're seeing when the election was completed, the ballot boxes were actually being confiscated by his, essentially, what appears to be his henchmen. And this is one of the videos that we saw on that. Yeah, I'll just go back. And on top, to make matters worse, thanks Stephen for sending me this. This is from Sydney Watson. She says Maduro has had the Venezuelan opposition's party national coordinator arrested. I'm so sad for the Venezuelan people, and this is what that looked like. So the Venezuelan people, they essentially, they've had enough. They really are sick of what they're seeing with regards to their country going up in flames, and they've actually been protesting in a massive fashion. This is another video of them actually toppling one of Maduro's statues there as well. Again, these people have nothing. These people have nothing. They really are in a difficult situation. And the police, I couldn't find the actual clip where I found it, but in a police headquarters, the police were actually taking off their uniforms and handing in their guns because they don't want to enforce anymore what he is doing. Now look, I don't speak Venezuelan, okay? I can't be your guide on this particular topic. This is just stuff that I'm seeing raw and unfiltered. But we do not want to go there. This is not where we want to go, where we have a situation where the governing party of the day is actually confiscating the ballots. Do any of you guys speak Venezuelan? And do you have any do you have any insights with regards to this?
Look, I mean, the reason many people think that this particular election of or supposed re-election of Nicolas Maduro is fraudulent is because he declared himself the winner before even showing any of the returns. And I'm not even too sure if he's shown any of the returns yet. He claims he won around about 66% of the vote. But election watchdogs all around the world are saying it all looks very dodgy. And in fact, they said the same thing when he was re-elected in 2018. Dozens of countries around the world refused to recognize that election, and many election watchdogs around the world said it wasn't a fair election. Venezuela's problems go back, decades, even generations. When earlier in the 20th century they discovered that they had the world's largest supply of crude oil, they made the big mistake, especially under Hugo Chavez, who came into power in 1998. They made the big mistake of basically making crude oil basically their whole economy reliant on crude oil. And the problem is that when oil prices were really high, like with the OPEC oil crisis in 1973, 1974, they were making a mint and they could fund incredible social services for everyone. But when oil prices started to go down, they hadn't diversified their economy and the country started to tank, which is exactly what has happened. The monthly wage, a month's wage in Venezuela nowadays is about $3.50 American. So their currency is more or less worthless. And in true socialist communist style, both Chavez and then after he died, Nicolas Maduro took over in 2013. And Maduro, they had a habit of imprisoning and prosecuting all of their political opponents, not unlike what has happened recently with the Democrats and Donald Trump. So it's become a basket case through really bad economic decisions, and there doesn't seem to be any obvious way out of it. What is going to happen now in Venezuela? I don't know if anyone knows, but Maduro has promised that he's going to have a sort of what he calls a great national dialogue with Venezuelans. And so what may actually just wind up happening is that he somehow consolidates power, and Venezuela kind of chugs on. Maybe he gives them a few concessions. And if that doesn't happen, and there is some kind of revolution, it's difficult to know how that will turn out. Will other countries intervene to try to stabilise things? It's very, very hard to tell, but it is a big, fat mess.
Yeah,
well, I'll just say that there was returns. They did show them, but if you people were very angry at the returns they saw on their TV sets, because if you added up the total percentage, it was 109%. So that's how people are saying, yeah, are we rigged or what? You know, like, And I just see the videos that have been coming out everywhere, like halfway through the day, for example, lines down the street, locking the doors to the voting booth. Voting booth's closed. And it's not like they can just get in their car, go to another one. It's because they're a communist third world country, they're stuck. No train service, no bus service. They can't go anywhere, so they can't vote. And that's all those type of tactics that they use. And we've seen it before. We've seen this for years in many of the South American countries. And you have to ask the question, is the reason why we're seeing a regime being controlled in Venezuela is because other nations who have a significant amount of oil want to make sure that they don't produce more oil? Because if Venezuela just started going, yeah, no, OPEC, we're just going to churn out the oil, we don't care, every single oil nation is going to suffer. And you're talking big nations like Russia, big nations like Saudi Arabia. So oil is a thing that's really, it dictates a lot of power in the world. It's one of the most sought after commodities. So that would have a big effect on it. But you feel for the Venezuelan people. I mean, there's situations where they were breaking into the zoo, like because the zoo had been abandoned, and they were killing and eating the zoo animals because they don't have any food. You know, this is the kind of realities that have happened over the years that we've seen of this communist dictatorship. And we see the people suffer. But this is not just Venezuela. It's happened in a lot of other South American countries and Central America throughout, the last 50-odd years.
Yeah, I think Venezuela, only 40, 50 years ago, they were ranked like 16th in the economic, and number 1 in South America in the economic policy index. But to make matters worse, guys, we're about that close to that happening with regards to how simple things happen. It's like when you go bankrupt. It's like, how did you go bankrupt? Well, firstly, slowly, and then immediately it dropped off a cliff. I thought it was quite an interesting observation looking at the, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but to me, I see signs all the time, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I thought it was quite fascinating that the Zimbabwe team in the Olympics was literally immediately in front of Australia on the front, and I've often made reference to how that is exactly where we'll end up. Places like Zimbabwe, places like Venezuela, if we don't pull this plane up, there is still time. There is still time, but you've got to focus on these elections. You've got to pay attention to what's going on around you, and you've got to actually really commit to those people that are fighting the fight around you, whether that's the good senators, whether that's shows like this and other groups. You've got to, now is the time. Like, otherwise it's going to get to the point where it's like, all right, where are we moving to next? Which country are we going to? That is like the Australia, where Australia was 40 years ago. I don't want to have that discussion. But Quinton, you're actually historically South African, right? you were 18 when you moved here?
Yeah, that's correct. I moved here with my parents and my sister about 16 years ago. Look, my father went to war back in the 80s. They called it the border war back then, against the communists trying to invade Africa. Out of that, I've seen governments change from the apartheid era into they called it the new Rainbow Nation. Look, everyone in today's world would recognise that apartheid was not the right thing to go, but I feel like it's gone completely 180 the other way now, where socialism, there's some really extreme, like if you want to see extreme political parties, there's a party called the EFF over there, and Zimbabwe and those kind of places used to be, on the same level as South Africa was in the early days. A lot of our people from the 1600s that got there, claimed their land and started farming, and it was a really successful place. South Africa had actually one of the strongest military in the world. And we've seen the ANC was actually part of, the party that Mandela was part of. They were actually part of what you would call, I suppose, guerrilla warfare, where they planted bombs and all sorts of malicious things on government buildings, and eventually they drew enough attention where they got the rest of the world's attention. Anyway, but my point of that whole story is I've witnessed firsthand what can go wrong if people don't take their vote seriously, if people don't call out governments that is not doing right by the population. So yes, they had a win there because now every person, doesn't matter what colour you are, has equal rights. But now they've created a sort of a reverse of the role there, and I won't go into all of the politics about it, but there's sort of that reverse apartheid now because, some of them holds a grudge because of what happened back in the day. So the last election, I think, didn't go too bad, but I fear for the day, because I still have family there, I fear for the day when the EFF party actually, because they're full out Marxist, there's no question about it. I fear for the day when they actually get the numbers to control government, and because they're talking about things like reappropriation of land and, without compensation, and free university for all of them. There's even situations there now where the likelihood of you getting a job is based on your skin color. There's a process of, how you get evaluated until they actually look at you to give you a job. So, a black male with the right qualifications can get the first look in. And then they go down the ranks until lastly, if they can't fill the position, the white male with the right qualifications can get the job. So it's still a dire situation. And the sad part for me is I think a lot of people that's in that situation don't actually realise that it's going backwards. It's a slow process, because I've been back a couple of times to visit family. We usually go back for funerals, which is a sad part, but every time I go back, you notice things are worse. Like infrastructure is worse. The people's living conditions are worse. And the hard part about that is they don't actually realise that it is worse. Anyway, which is why I'm really determined in this country to make sure that, I am one of the people that actually steps up and keep the government accountable. Tell the people in my community that, look, this is your country, this is your rights that you need to stand up for, because there's a lot of places in the world where people don't stand up for their rights and they wish they had, but it's too late.
Just want to say it's pretty remarkable because you don't have your South African accent anymore fully.
I reckon I can hear a bit of it.
Picked up the Aussie ways, and
yeah, people pick it up after they hear I was South African. But my friends used to take the piss out of me at school for it, so I learned pretty quick.
Sorry, Ben.
I was just going to say one thing. I had a family friend who he served in the South African Special Forces in the 80s, and he actually fought in Angola. And one of the comments that he made is, when they would actually capture like black Angolans, and they had a mercenary unit, the South Africans, that was full of Angolans as well. They would be begging, don't hand us over to this mercenary unit, because they'll be more brutal to us than you will. And that just goes to show you that the Marxism and the communism, that how brutal they can be to one another, and that the hatred that they develop for each other, it ruins people, it ruins nations. And look at what it did to those Angolans who weren't communists versus ones that were. And they would murder each other over it, but not just brutalise each other over it. So it just goes to show you that I think in Australia, people don't know how good we've got it here and how lucky we are and how it can be taken away from us. There are people who want to, see chaos. They want to see the government fall. the system break down. And I think that's one of the biggest fears that I have is this push and drive to make the public lose faith in the system, lose faith in our government and elected officials, is only leading to one outcome, and that's exactly the type of outcome that we've seen in countries in Africa. Look where the breakdown of society, the collapse of civilization, but then a force or a foreign entity coming in to install their takeover and their control of the country that's not in line with the values of the country or the people who created that country.
And I think for me, the last 4 or 5 years it's been exciting to watch that the conversation of politics just come back to the table. I think it was very fashionable for us not to talk about politics. People want to avoid it. Now it's so much in your face, and creating a critical conversation around politics, any conversation's great, but I'm just so surprised and myself included, that didn't talk politics 4 or 5 years ago, wasn't interested, left it to other people. And then realising the mess we've got ourselves in when we've given our power over to the government, and then having to take that power back and bring that conversation back. It's just been amazing that people are ready to have the conversation, want to have the conversation, and more than that, they actually want to get involved and do something about it. That's been great.
I think it's fantastic, and it just goes back to your point you made. There's a lot of foreign interference now in Canberra. That's been talked about. Foreign agents. We discovered a spy nest. The ASIO come out and admitted that.
India, China.
Foreign countries are coming in, and in the political sphere, they're everywhere. And it's not just the typical nations you think. It's all different nations with all different agendas, but their goal is not to look after Australia. Their goal is to further their nation's own interests. And it's terrifying, because if you look in Canberra, all the staffers and bureaucrats, not all the bureaucrats, but some of the bureaucrats, but particularly the staffers of MPs, politicians, a lot of them don't have to get security clearance.
Yep.
So you look at that, and that's a huge red flag. If you step foot in that building to work, you should all be security cleared through our intelligence agencies. But currently we don't have that, and it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening, the security situation.
And it's shocking how cheaply they can be bought off. A few thousand. A few thousand.
That's right. And that's and some of the old, there's all the ones that are obvious. It was floated around political. They were around last election, floating around all the smaller parties and stuff like that. And now they're trying to get into big parties, and they always pop up. They're like a whack-a-mole, and they're popping up everywhere, and they think they're clever. And a lot of them are, but there are some that are very, very clever, very, very good and dangerous. And the problem is it's become an epidemic. And if you speak to MPs from, say, 25, 30 years ago, you mention all this to them, they go, is that what it's become? It's never like that when I was in.
Yep.
But then you look at the decline of our parliament, you're starting to put 2 and 2 together, but that's...
I think John Anderson got the shock of his life when he went for pre-selection in 2021 of the Nationals Party, and he saw where that fell.
That was terrible. That was a disgrace, what happened there.
Stephen?
Can I say... nothing makes socialism more appealing than when you promise people land and houses when they know they can't get one otherwise. That's actually how the Bolsheviks managed to draw up an army of about 500,000 Russians. Oh. They basically said, if we get into power, we will give you land. Remember, Russia was one of the last feudal countries in the world. People didn't own anything. And this is one of the reasons the housing crisis in Australia is not just about houses. It's about the future of this country. We have a young generation of people who are being taught to hate Australia, to be cynical about this country in their schools. They have, for the most part, no idea of history. They don't really know what's happened in the past, what has succeeded, what has failed. And at the same time, they know that it's going to be very, very difficult, even impossible for them to afford to buy their own land. Those are the perfect conditions for socialists to come in and say, look, the system is broken. You're never going to get anywhere with it. Let me suggest an alternative. And if you vote us in, we will redistribute everything. And this is what has happened in history. It happened in ancient Greece with Solon in Athens. It happened in Sparta with Lycurgus. It happens in modern history. Again, it's what the Bolsheviks did. Just find yourself a group of people who think that they can never own anything, and you will be able to sell them anything. And that is exactly where we are in Australia right now.
It all came to me when I was in Zimbabwe. I was seeing all of this come together, and I was like, crap, we are actually going down this train track. We're on the tracks, and it's just a matter of time before we get there. It's about how quickly we get there. The EFF, if you guys aren't familiar, you might have seen that political party in South Africa with all the red flags jumping on the stage to a pretty fun beat, and they're saying, death to the Boers, death to the Boers. That's like saying death to their farmers. That's exactly what they're saying. And I when I was there, you guys know I have a little bit of a knack of predicting election results with scary accuracy. When I was there in December, January, I actually did predict the election result they had a month or so ago in South Africa. I said it's going to be Mandela's party in coalition with this EFF party. That's exactly what happened. This EFF party are like the Greens party, except they are radical, not on climate change, on the color of your skin, the thing you can't change. It's just like, unless you're Michael Jackson, it's like, it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. And when I see this particular thing going down, you know, we talk about protesting over a 5% Aboriginal representation in organisations, or even a 50-50 men-women split. Over there, on boards, there is a whole industry in South Africa where at least 50% of the board has to be black. At least 50%. 50%. Like we're getting upset about 5% here. That is where it's going, and we will lose this. We will lose this if we don't actually put our foot down and do the right thing.
Thank you. You articulated that a lot better than I did. That's what I was trying to say.
Look, I appreciate there's a lot of trauma involved.
Well, and that's part of the reason why I was first out there with the Voice campaign saying to people, no, do not vote this in, because us segregating one part of the society from everyone else, making them believe that, you know, for whatever reason they need to be treated differently, that is not healthy. That is not how you integrate society and get people to get along. That's actually doing the opposite.
Absolutely.
And I think it's you know, one of the best parts of Australian society and what Australia actually is that really exists nowhere else in the world is it's a classless society. You know, and it was developed, you know, you're talking in the trenches in Gallipoli and Europe in the war, you know, all the suffering that they went through, all class prejudices were eliminated, and there was no class. Everyone was the same. And to this day, you can be any race in the world. You can be a billionaire, you can be living in Department of Housing on welfare. It doesn't matter what you are, where you're from, what walk of life. You can sit down together at a pub in this country and drink beer together, and there's no prejudice towards one another. There's nowhere else in the world you can actually go and realistically do that. I've been all over the world, and this is one of the only places where we truly have a classless society, and it is one of the reasons why we are a success, why we punch above our weight in nearly everything we do. We excel as Australians, and that is the reason why. Classless society. What Anthony Albanese tried to do with The Voice was create a class-based society. Bill Shorten lost in 2019 because he tried to play class politics. And that is exactly why Albanese is going to lose the next election. It's because he tried to do the same thing. And this is what the Labor Party do whenever they get in, because they've been so heavily influenced by the Greens, and the Green element of their party is to push this concept of class warfare, class-based politics, us versus them. And it's an absolute disgrace, and it's never going to work in Australia. And the reason it's never going to work is because you can be the poorest child in this country, born into poverty, and you can work your way up to being the leader of this country and run the entire nation. The door is open for you if you work hard. So this is why it's so different. But if you look at, there's a theory of the new generation, like the Greens being Marxists, they're doing exactly that, attacking the housing policy, pushing, you can't afford house, vote Greens, you know. But what they don't understand is all these minority groups and people they prop up to help them get over the line. As soon as if they were in power, those people are culled, they're gone. And we see that time and time again with communism. Like when the Bolsheviks took over, Lenin used to have nude marches. He used to march with nudists down the street. As soon as he takes power, outlaws it, and anyone in the nudist groups gone straight away. So he also pushed the LGBTQ. He pushed them to help him. As soon as he's in, bans it. Bans and persecutes LGBTQ people. And that's the kind of thing people forget. That's what these radical people do. They're using you as a vessel to get themselves over the line into power and use any avenue or way that they can to do so, and they look for the downtrodden group. But as I said, with the being able to work your way through, work your way up in society now, they can't do what they did in Russia, appeal to the working class poor, They can't do that. So now it's like Leninism. So now they've gone to Leninism 2.0, also known as biological Leninism. They look for the most downtrodden people in our society and they try and elevate them, prop them up to use them. But it's never going to work, and this is what they don't understand, because when you went to the farm and there's a big bloke who's lifted big, heavy things on the farm his whole life, and you go, hey, mate, would you like to have a bit more power? All you do is come with us and people, we tell you to go shoot, and we'll give you some power. He goes, yeah, sure, sweet. And he's actually capable. But then you look at the biological Leninism stuff, those people are not going to be capable of running gulags and taking over the country. So really this is destined to fail. That's what this whole new Marxist sort of movement is.
Yeah, I think you touched on something really important there. Australia is a bundle of phenomenal people from different countries that have fled horrifying stories, whether that's the south of Africa or Eastern Europe or the Middle East. Stephen, I'm about to move on. Did you have anything to add?
I was just going to say, to piggyback off Ben's point, Australians, like Americans, we are aspirational people. Our instinct when we see people who have more than us or who, say, are in a higher middle class than us is not to hate them. It is to want to have what they have one day and to work to get it. And that is what sort of Labor ideologues don't understand. Their instinct, and they're taught this by their sort of Marxist ideology, is to hate those who have more. But the average Australian is not an ideological fanatic. Their instinct is aspirational, not ideological. And so what's the Australian response to someone making more than you? Well, you get out there and over time you do the same thing. And that's what's made this country so successful.
Absolutely. Moving on to perhaps a different part of the world where we've received some interesting people like myself historically, even though I wasn't born there. We're seeing the destruction of a lot of countries right now in the Middle East, and this is a topic I haven't really talked about. You know what I'm like, guys. I'm like Australia first, but this is starting to heat up to the point where it might actually become a global conflict. America's got its hands full on almost 3 fronts now. And don't be surprised if very soon we actually see a situation where we have conscription come back to Australia. And I don't say this is clickbait. I'm actually really worried about where this is going, because the Middle East, I'll cut to the story and it'll make sense as we go along. I'm jumping the gun. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh killed in Israeli airstrike in Tehran. That's in Iraq. Sorry. Tehran is Iran or Iraq? I'm showing my lack of knowledge on this.
It's Iran.
It's Iran, right? Very good. That from our Assyrian, in the Middle East. See, this is the thing, man. I've never been there, but people think I'm an expert on the topic. I'm actually not. So Israel have basically taken this person out, who very, very big, very powerful Hamas leader. Took him out in his home, I do believe. And on top of that, Israel also took out a leader of Hezbollah, which is a organization in Lebanon to the north. This is heating up, and I'm actually getting really worried about this because it's the Middle East. They've always got things going on, except this is starting to expand beyond the classic realm of conflict. And this is a video we've got of the actual bombing in Beirut. Here you go. So supposedly this killed at least 3 people, 2 of which were kids. Just so you know, this is from Charlie Barkos, who's a friend of the show. Is Australia ready for anything? Now, why am I bringing this here? Why, if the US has their hands tied in Ukraine, if they have their hands tied in the Middle East, if they have their hands tied in the Pacific, you can be damn well sure that they're going to be stretched thin. And the problem if they're stretched thin is China will make a move on Taiwan. And we are not ready. We are nowhere near ready. I mean, in terms of having aircraft carriers and submarines and the personnel we need, the government's been dragging their feet. And in terms of the likelihood of that actually happening, this is a particular article which was from Ian. This is from the Mandarin, Ian McPhedrian. He says, in the peacetime concept that Australia would have 10 years advance warning of war is finished. The new reality is more like a time frame of 3 to 5 years, according to some of Australia's top defence experts. This means the government's strategic defence review by former Defence Minister Stephen Smith and ex-Defence Chief Sir Angus Houston has some tough decisions to make about both strategy and capability by next March. China's rapid military expansion, aggression towards Taiwan, illegal activities in the South China Sea, and push into the South Pacific have added to the strategic uncertainty triggered by Russia's wanton aggression in Ukraine. Defence Minister Richard Marles has suggested Australia might require a more defensive rather than proactive stance to counter future threats, a so-called porcupine or echidna strategy. However, some strategic analysts say the problem with retreating behind spikes is the risk of facing an adversary with longer spikes. Ben, is Australia in any kind of position to tackle this kind of problem right now?
If Australia was to go to a serious high-intensity conflict, and we're talking not fighting insurgents, not fighting small, weak nations like Iraq that don't really have an air force, don't really have a navy or any kind of really big capabilities. So when we say fighting a full-scale war against an adversary that's capable, such as the CCP, Australia would last 14 to 21 days before complete capitulation. They don't have the ammunition for a start, stockpiled, nor do they have the capacity to produce ammunition at the rate required for high sustained conflict. Because producing ammunition for a low level conflict, low intensity conflict, say like Afghanistan, that's easy to keep up with. When you're talking, artillerymen are going through tens of thousands of rounds a day, you're not going to be able to keep up with that. We simply do not have the capacity to do so. But not just in terms of logistics. We have the best technology we've ever had in our military in its entire history, and I'm very, very glad to say there are some fantastic senior officers and senior soldiers still in the army. I serve with them, and they are pushing incredibly hard to do whatever they can to prevent the complete collapse of our defence forces. But they're fighting with one arm tied behind their back. Every time they push for something new, every time they push for something to advance capability, they are hindered. They're hindered by diversity and equity quotas. They're hindered by all of these stupid bureaucratic nonsense and doing paperwork, filling out dozens of sheets of paperwork just to get equipment out to use it. It's just the Defence Force has gone to a point where you'd have to argue at this point, is what's going on in the Defence Force really not the actions of a foreign adversary sabotaging deliberately our Defence Force? Because nothing can get this bad. But if we look at it from one of the biggest problems that they've got is what was always the greatest strength of our Defence Force, particularly our army. It was the personnel. It was the Australian people. They would send them anywhere in the world, and you're talking with a tin can, and they'd build something out of it. When Rommel... when we fought in North Africa in World War II, when Rommel went to attack certain Australian positions, every time he was boggled. He goes, those troops only got put in like a day ago and they've already entrenched. How was this even possible? There's no supply trucks coming. We were watching the roads. It's because the Aussies, with their individual initiative, which is the cornerstone of our soldiers, went and just gather anything they can, entrench, build the trenches, build the defences, and no one asked them to do it. They used their initiative to do so. And that's one of the reasons why we were so strong in the world. But we did all of this with nothing, with very limited technology, with very limited supplies. We would always do so well. Now it's the opposite. We've got the best toys, the best gear, but the personnel is at the worst level it has ever been. That's a direct result of Defence Force recruiting, lowering of standards, in particularly to allow females into combat roles. They said they'd never do it. It'd always be the standard, and women would have to pass the standard. Ever since they said that, they've dropped it because they want a 30% quota of females. And I've proven this. It's not a conspiracy theory or anything. It has been proven in Senate estimates. The chief of the Defence Force admitted it, and this is what's actually happened. We are in a position where diversity and equity quotas, Marxist ideology and woke ideologies take precedence over the defence of our nation. And we're in a very, very serious situation, because what is going to occur is, if they go to a major conflict, they're going to suffer tremendous casualties, because it's modern warfare, and what we've got now is like nothing we've seen before. People get chopped up very fast. The people who come back from that, we'll have a casualty rate like 30, 40% in any kind of initial battles. The people who come back from that, you'll probably have 30 to, about 30%, maybe more, who will drop out due to mental health, can't go on, they're traumatised from it, because they never should have been in the Defence Force in the first place. And I could go on for hours talking about these sorts of stories, but basically, long story short, if we're to fix our Defence Force, unfortunately, they're going to need to remove females from combat corps, and that's not an attack on females. I serve with some of the greatest females in the Defence Force, tremendous people, and I'm very, very glad to have met them and known them, because they made my life better knowing them. But when you are taking a young girl who turns up and wants to be just a medic, or wants to be a clerk, or wants to be a driver, or whatever, no, you should do infantry. You should be out in frontline combat. No, they push them into these roles.
Seen it.
And what's actually happening is the discharge rate, the medical discharge rate for females is off the planet.
Absolutely.
You're talking 70, 80% are getting medically discharged. Their hips are being destroyed because they can't cope with the carrying of the heavy loads and the heavy impacts that's required from doing combat-related jobs. So the concept of diversity and equity and these woke Marxist ideologies, young women are being put on the altar and sacrificed for this ideology, and the mental health problems that are coming out of our military, especially for our young females, they've proven 87% higher suicide rate amongst female veterans than other females in society. 87% higher, and no one's taking care of our women. No one's taking care of our women in the Defence Force.
Yeah,
and the fact that if you want to put your women up to go into some of the most horrible things in war. I mean, I knew some of the toughest men I've ever met in my life, absolute nails. War left them a shaking mess, drug addicted, can't go outside the house because they have panic attacks. And these are guys who are the toughest guys I've ever met, like way tougher than I am, And if war can do that to them and destroy them, why would you want to send your beautiful women, your females, the ones that are the backbone of your society?
Yeah.
Your society only exists because of women.
Yeah.
Why would you want to sacrifice them in the war on the altar? I mean, we see it in Ukraine right now. They've run out of men, so now they're sending these young women to the front lines. And I see a lot of footage and I see a lot of things coming out of the front lines in what's going on over there. And it breaks my heart when you see Russians going in with helmet cams and they're clearing trenches that they've been shelling and attacking for a long period of time. They've taken it, and you're seeing all the bodies in there, braided hair. Didn't stand a chance. Should never have been there in the first place. Could barely hold up a rifle, and they put them on the front line to just be killed. And that you're throwing away one of the most precious things that you have in your society.
On the front end, I've seen this firsthand with two recruits that were entered in, a brother and a sister. The brother entered in 3 months before the sister. Didn't hear anything really properly. He said, yep, no worries, we'll see you in 6 months. Sister applies 3 months after he does. Yep, no worries, yep, you can start, yep. Well, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Push you into the infantry. And she's like, hang on a sec. What do you mean you're dropping the requirements from me? She was angry. She was angry. It was like, what do you mean you dropping the amount of push-ups and this and that, beep tests and all of that? She was like, I should be able to have the confidence that the man or woman standing next to me in this combat role can do the exact same things I could do. She was quite the overachiever. Why can't my brother get in?
That in itself, this idea, I should be able to meet the same standards as a man. I mean, I'm sorry, that is delusional. You're always going to find some women who can, there is no doubt about it. But we've got a generation of people brought up on television shows and cartoons where women are kicking men's asses all the time. But it's not real life. Now, I think that Australia is never going to be able to... Australia will never be able to stand up to China. At the very least, we want to have a military and hardware that can at least inflict a blow on China that maybe dissuade it from taking a first shot. But at the end of the day, Australia is always going to have to rely on America as an ally. And the best thing I think that we can do is to be a facilitator of a regional pact with other Asian nations to essentially make it as costly as possible if China decides to make a move on anyone, particularly Taiwan, and the whole thing will have to be backed by American military might. And it seems to me that our best mode of defense, other than revitalizing our military and getting more people into the army, is to actually maintain that alliance with America. And I'm sorry to say that may mean that Australia is just, as a matter of fact, going to have to go to wars with America to maintain that alliance, and that is just the real politic of the situation.
I think. Oh, sorry, go on. Yep.
Sorry, I was going to say the real concerning part for me on the bigger picture is that we're at a very particular point in history right now where the West is literally tearing ourselves apart. Like, we have weak leaders. The West is weak and vulnerable. And I bet you anything that Russia and China and all of these big powers that wants to reclaim their number one spot in the world, they're watching and waiting. I mean, simple things. Look at our energy transition going to renewables. Where does most of the renewable components get produced? It comes from China. It's being shipped here on Chinese ships. So if we transition our entire energy grid to something that relies on components being made in a foreign country, because we don't make those things here. We won't be able to make those things here if they stop coal in this country, right? So then the renewable energy actually becomes a security risk. So I am very concerned that if we don't get strong leaders that actually has the salt to stand up to these, and I don't mean Australia, obviously, because we got no chance in hell, but I mean, we need someone like a Donald Trump to actually stand up to these guys and protect the rest of the Western world and get us back on track so we can keep the peace.
I'm going to have to disagree with the panel here on one particular item, and that is the concept that we cannot defend ourselves. I believe Australians can do anything because we've proven time and time again all over the world that we punch above our weight. I mean, World War II, first land battle that the Nazis lost in World War II was Australians against us in North Africa. The Japanese never been defeated properly in a land battle. That was on Kokoda. We defeated them. So we punch above our weight, and we have done all throughout human history. But the problem is exactly what you said. It's having the right leaders in the right positions that are going to actually push to have a strong defence force, but not just a strong defence force. You need an entire Australia, a community behind them that's going to be strong, that's going to be strong enough to support our defence forces and to protect our nation. I mean, one of the things that they were talking about doing was a B-21 stealth bomber capability. That was one of the things that was used as an offensive capability as a deterrent against an invader. And they ended up shelving it because it was too expensive. But if you really look at it, a lot of these things now with AUKUS, the opening to technology and the opening to things that we can build up a defence force that's capable of defending the nation, but also a defence force that Australians want to join. They want to serve. They feel proud to be a part of it, and they never want to leave it. And it's not currently the case. Lots of young men and women are leaving in their droves. They're leaving, in some cases, trying to get medically discharged just so they can get out of it. And it's because of the way they get treated primarily. They get very good pay, but it's the conditions, it's the way they get treated. And let's face it, it's one of the biggest problems they've got in the Defence Force is the Officers Club. They can do no wrong. It's a clique. Once you're in it, if you're lucky enough to go to Duntroon and get in it, or one of the other academies to be an officer, you're in a gravy train. Nothing you can do will ever get you removed. A digger sends a wrong text message to someone and they're kicked out the next day. And that's one of the biggest problems. What would they need to do is a reform to the military, remove direct entry officer. That's one of the biggest reforms they could do, and combine NCOs and officers into one, similar to what the Roman army had, where you join as the lowest rank, you can become the general one day. The progression naturally through promotion will lead you there, yeah.
I'm actually inclined to agree with you on that, Ben, regarding Australia being able to stand up to China. It's all that we lack is leadership. That's my honest opinion. When it comes to morale, we didn't do any favours for us with morale with regards to the pandemic. We were kicking all the people out that were vaccinated. We now know that the US has reversed their forced jab on their personnel. Turns out they actually need to get the recruiting up, and it was crap to start with. And so we decimated the morale with regards to that. We deterred people of courage in this country, many of which in the freedom, open-minded sort of community that we're in, from joining the military. And on top of that, we've got a lot going for us. I mean, as much as we worry about the military personnel in China being 3.3 million people, Australia is still 27 million people. Now, look, I'm not saying that every man, woman, and child has to be able to hold a gun. I don't think so. But we are a very, very long way away from China. If a lot of people don't realise this, we've got a massive sea in between us. London is actually closer to Beijing than Sydney is to Beijing. Did you know that? And the funny thing about that is they've got to come a very long way with a very large moat here to around us to get us. It's hard enough for them to take Taiwan. The idea that they're going to be able to get here and be able to have a full supply chain to actually support. Sure, they can do a lot of long spike attacks, a lot of missile attacks.
They've built concrete islands in the Spratly Islands in the South China Seas. They're onto this. This is not something they haven't thought of. And I just wanted. I don't know that we're saying that Australia can't defend itself. I think what I'm saying, I don't know, maybe we're not in such disagreement, but it's one thing for Australia historically and even now to win particular battles. It's another thing for Australia to win a war on its own with China. Well, that is a totally different thing.
Well, my concern there, I'd just like to point out, like the situations I think you are talking about is a conventional war, right? Which the weapons capabilities that they've got these days, it's most likely not going to be a conventional war. That's what concerns me. That's what's got me worried about that we're not ready.
Oh, we're definitely not ready. Absolutely agree with you. It's, but we can be ready. That's the thing. And the technology that we have, I mean, our surface fleet for the Navy, for example, we are right up there with the very best in the world. And in actual fact, a lot of our naval capabilities are superior to that of the CCP. They trump them. I mean, you're talking about some of the capabilities like a Hobart-class destroyer. It can sit off, like 30 nautical miles offshore and, fry a city or, with electronic warfare capabilities. The things that it can actually do to a whole city is unbelievable. So that's just one small capability that the surface fleet has. But in terms of, when Scott Morrison was in, one of the things he actually pushed behind, it was one of the things that never really got much media attention. He opened up a lot of funding for defence, long-term projects, getting medium to short-range missile capabilities, air defence capabilities in the forms of very good air defence systems, and increasing our technology sharing with the United States and bringing in lots of technology that we were never ever meant to get. Upgrading all of our bases and airfields in the north of Australia to be able to take B-52 bombers and B-2 bombers as well. So we're building up a capability that will actually make us very, very, concerning for the CCP. And one thing we just have to look at is when you're on the right path is when the CCP get mad. And what did they do when we said we're getting nuclear subs? They went off their tree. They were so angry about it because they understand what that means for us. All of a sudden, we're not this little chihuahua nation they can just push around. We are now a nation that we could be anywhere, anytime. And the capabilities that these things have, it just boggles people's minds. So I'm very happy to say that there is the technology there and we can have the capability. But exactly what you said, yes, we're not ready. We can get ready, but it takes courage. It takes courage from a government to make the big calls. Can Richard Marles make those calls right now? Absolutely not. He's got no chance. Could Andrew Hastie and our Shadow Minister, could he make the calls? Absolutely he could. He's been in the Defence Force. He's been overseas and served on operations, done a lot for this country. He'd know exactly what to do. So this is why I have a lot of hope for the future. For our Defence Force and our ability to defend ourselves.
Again, the reason I bring this topic up, guys, and we're comparing it to China, is not because we're going to fang it and take China out. That's not the.
No, of course not.
We need a metric to actually measure exactly how Australia competes versus China. We invest $42 billion every year in our military. They invest $233 billion every year. Their personnel is 3.3 million personnel, whereas ours is 80,000. Personnel, which is getting close to a record low, especially with recruitment. They've got 79 submarines. Australia's got 6. In terms of tanks, we've got some 59 of the Abrams class, whereas they've got 3,200. We've got 75 jets, some of the best in the world, actually, whereas they've got 1,200. Australia, our economy is the same size as Russia's. Did you know that? And so and everyone sees Russia as this big, overwhelming force, but there's so much wastage in our government. There's so much wastage. I mean, just $42 billion is how much money we actually spend on the Aboriginal stuff. That's our defence budget. That's our defence budget. And a lot of Aboriginal people would agree with me when they say, well, that's not making it to us. I know. It's because it's being wasted in Canberra. It's right. Going via... It's like those charities you donate to, $90 a month to, save a child in Africa, and only $5 gets to the kid. That's what's going on here.
Absolutely. Just to your point, Joel, it's exactly what you said. It's definitely not anti-Chinese. That's what we need to remember. What we want to see in our lifetime is the Chinese people free of communism. I mean, if you look at how well Taiwan performs, how well Hong Kong historically have performed, and when Chinese people go to other countries, how they prosper. These are a good people. It's just if you look at, they're being controlled by a satanic sort of element that hates humanity. And the Chinese people have been severely held back by communism. It hasn't enriched them, it has held them back. And they could be, the future that we could see the Chinese people in without communism. That's a future I want to see, because I have great hope for a future for them and what they could do for mankind, no longer being a communist nation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Guys, I'm going to move to the last topic because my guests have been very generous and many of them have come from very far away, a couple hours drive away. And I wanted to cover this last topic, but before I do, if you're watching live and you're wondering, why is it we're only getting up to 10 to 30 concurrent viewers? If you're on the mainstream platforms, that's why. If you actually go over to X, you'll see that there's hundreds, almost thousands of people watching. And the clips that we get from each of these videos, every week we average 600,000 views across the clips. So you're not alone. There's actually a lot of you out there, except it's so convoluted because I'm weird. I have 4 different accounts for every different platform because of the censorship. But there's actually a lot of you. And with regards to getting the word out, we are making a difference. People come up to me all the time in the street and they're saying, Joel, I love that Stephen Shavira. God bless him. Just tell him to, to try and make his points a little bit more respectable. No, I'm joking, Stephen. You're too respectable.
That's true.
They want you to go harder. They want you.
I swear too much.
They want you to tear your shirt off, Stephen.
Hulkamania.
Hulkamania. But no, guys, keep sharing it. God bless you all. The last topic I wanted to cover here. It's what we've seen going on in the UK, and this ties in with immigration. Police have clashed with a violent crowd. This is from ABC News, of course. Far-right protesters are fueled by anger on false online rumours regarding what's been going on in the UK. That 3 girls were stabbed outside a yoga studio. Now, these girls, as you can see in this particular image here, were the said victims of this particular attack. Absolutely heartbreaking attack that's happened. And the Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has basically engaged in showing his respect to what's happened there. And while he was showing his respect, he ended up getting heckled by people that are saying, hey, this is a direct result of the immigration policy of Labor.
How many more children are dying our streets, Prime Minister?
How many more children, he said.
How many more children? How many more children, Prime Minister? Are we going to do something? Time for change, Starmer. Come on, it's needed. How many more children? Is it mine next? Bye-bye.
These things are just to show, aren't they?
Make a real change! Our children! Go away!
I just found out my friend's 9-year-old daughter was killed. The person I've held as a child, and you can't do shit! He can't do shit! He's meant to be the Prime Minister!
Terrible. Her friend's daughter passed, and Yeah, sorry for the swearing, but this is exactly what we see. And the Prime Minister, it is just show. It's just show. And I don't sense the sincerity because they're pushing these exact policies. Ben, what were your thoughts on this particular story?
Oh, three little angels lost their lives, and it's a government that refuses to do anything about it. I mean, London has been the knife crime capital of Europe for what, decade, maybe more? I've never seen nightclubs that have to have trauma kits for stabbing and shooting at the front door, and response teams that are ex-Polish military and all these different things that come when guns and knives get pulled. They get called like a SWAT team. This is the kind of reality that live over there. Look, kids stabbing people in the street with a butcher's knife, like little kids at a park pulling knives out of their shorts, and these are school kids. And a lot of it is to do with the unchecked mass migration that's happened to that country of people who do not share British values, who do not assimilate, have no intention of doing so, and for whatever unknown reason, they hate the local communities and the local people. And it's not just British people. I mean, you have suburbs over there where that are controlled by one particular, like a Pakistanis will control a particular, suburb, and if you're Indian, you can't go in there. If you're an black African, you can't go in there. It's not just against British people. It's against anyone who's not their group, and it's not a case of you can just, for us as Australians, it boggles the mind. I mean, where we can walk through any suburb in the country quite comfortably. You go over there, you'll get stabbed. You'll actually get stabbed if you walk down these because you're not from their community. And a government that allows that to happen, allows hateful ideologies to just get portrayed at, mosques and all these things. Look, we see it here. We see, things getting dredged up, and then people want to march through the eastern suburbs and intimidate the local community, and anyone who they think is, for example, a Jewish person, let's harass them, and let's harass. What did the mother walking down Old Head Road, going to the cafe for a coffee, the Jewish mum with her kid? What does she do about what's going on overseas? She had nothing to do with it. But that's the mentalities that are starting to show their faces here that we've never seen before. We didn't have these violent sort of people. People don't go and attack people based on ethnicity and race. It doesn't happen here. Or even ideology, even religion. We never really had it. Aussies have been fairly peaceful, but these are imported ideas, imported ideology. But you see this in Britain, in Germany, in France, in the Netherlands, all these imported ideologies that are not from those countries that result in violence against the community and bring in mass unchecked immigration of people who do not want to assimilate and inherently are violent. I mean, you see in London, you see in a lot of places in the UK, maybe the last, say, 6 or 7 years, you've seen organised crime go to levels of extreme violence that's never been seen before. And the reason why is because they brought over a lot of Congolese come over from the Congo. And obviously, growing up around a very violent place, you only survive there if you're if you can keep up and protect yourself or get away from it and hide somewhere. They come over and they brought a lot of their ideology with them and the violence with them. And because they went after they got into organised crime, went after other criminals with such intense violence, the only way to respond was to also match it. And now that's trickled over into everyday life. It's trickling over to the streets, and it's getting out of control. As much as it is an immigration problem, it's an organised crime problem as well. They don't go and tackle the organised crime and deport people who are participating in acts of violence and horrendous crimes against the community.
Yeah, again, we're seeing arrogance of a government who doesn't listen to their people. They've just got an agenda, a program they want to push out, and they have tunnel vision to do that, and at the cost to us. It's just unbelievable. Sorry.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
It's absolutely dreadful. And to make matters worse, guys, there's some phenomenal people that have come from around the world, and they've been grandfathered into a country like Australia, whether it's Eastern European states or South Africa, Zimbabwe, Middle Eastern states. We've been grandfathered in. I basically don't speak any Arabic. I've never been to the place except maybe a week, Lebanon and maybe Egypt. But then you get these people that come here and they're messing it up. They're messing it up. It's like, and the most angry people, I know if you're immigrants, you've got a bit of imposter syndrome, and you don't want to rock the boat, and Labor let you in, and you're just stoked you can keep a job, but you've actually got to talk on this. Australia, people are shocked when I tell them this. Australia is 30% immigrants, and 52% are either immigrants or the children of immigrants. 52%. It's one of the highest in the world for an old democracy like Australia. And if you don't start speaking up on these topics, then we're going to have a situation where they ruin it. They ruin it. This enormous gem we have here called Australia, where we can raise our kids and we can have economic sovereignty, and the government, most of all, for the most part of our history, stays out of our lives, which we're slowly losing now, as we saw in the COVID years. If you don't speak up, we will lose it. It will become like the crap holes we came from. It'll become like that. That's where it's going. And if we don't politicians are like gloves. They're like gloves, okay? They will either be filled with their own values if they're of conviction, or they will be filled with the values of special interests, of their community, of organizations that lobby them. And you can actually force them to do, if they don't have their own values, if they're not, your values or whatever, you can actually lobby them if you're a constituent. That's what these lovely people on my left have done in their community of Cessnock. That's what they're continuing to do. That's why they almost won the mayorship. That's why they come second in federal elections. This is exactly, in state elections rather. This is, sorry, Quinton's like, I wish we was a federal. But you know what? Stuart Bonds, you guys got behind Stuart Bonds in the federal election for the Hunter. And that's why you guys have a 70% no vote in your area. Yep. And that's what this is about.
I'd like to point out one of the hypocrisies of that whole situation, right? So on one side, on the left, Greens and Labor, you've got some of the more extreme people jumping up and down saying, we need reparations for Aboriginal people because of the colonisation and, you're taking our land basically. But then these same people is okay with importing 750,000 migrants in 1 year. So is that not colonisation?
It's an invasion.
You know what I mean?
It's an invasion.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. I think it was Nigel Farage, he said, what's happening in the UK is D-Day in reverse and slowly.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. They're not monitoring the people that are coming in. It's in mass, and we're not getting doctors and nurses.
No, and that's it. We need houses built. We need tradespeople out there in my industry. I work in the coal industry. We need people with certain skills, right? We need farmers. But I don't think it's not on the list of the immigrants that we're getting in that, hey, we need these positions filled. How about we look at, getting some of those people with those skills and bring them here? But we're getting people, to do bloody waiter jobs.
It's ridiculous. I got so much to say on this, and maybe it warrants another podcast. But when my dad came here, he built the churches that he was buried. He had the funeral services in. He built many churches around the country. He was in the construction industry. He literally helped build the country. If we're bringing in people that are just takers, if we're saying no to people like the ones I met in South Africa, lawyers. Maybe we've got too many lawyers, but lawyers and people with money and entrepreneurs and business owners who I did speak to there that can't even get into Australia. But I've met the people that come here, and it's like, what do you have to offer? You've actually got to buy in to our values. You've got to have a skill set, and instead what we're getting is ridiculous. Like on my team, on this particular team for the podcast that bring it together, we've got myself, an Aussie first and foremost, of Lebanese and Syrian ethnicity. Video editor is French Lebanese. Our switcher guy is a Syrian. Our one of our comms guys and managers, Italian. Another guy works with us. He's Greek. Our cartoon guy, he's Italian. We're all Aussie, but we come from other countries, and we're here fighting for this absolute gem of a thing. I'm going to stop talking there. But did you guys have any thoughts on that little spiel?
Well, I mean, I liked it a lot. I'm half Slavic, half Anglo myself. My grandparents on my father's side basically fled communism, came here in 1948. Australia's in a much better position than England is at the moment because we've got a little bit of, we've got a lot of water around us, and it's a much harder place to get to than England is. This problem in England has been building up for decades. And one of the big problems in England is, as sort of Ben suggested, that there has been a failure of policing in England. And what seems to happen is that when, say, Muslim protesters about Israel or something like that hit the streets and start causing damage, start getting violent, the police just turn and run. But when you have people protesting immigration in the street, they're the ones that the police will either arrest in the street, or you'll find they come to your house and arrest you in your house for alleged hate speech. And the Brits are basically fed up with it. They remember the Rotherham grooming gangs from the late 90s throughout the 2000s, where literally thousands of girls were raped, and the police knew about it and turned a blind eye. Why? Because they didn't want to be accused of racism, because it just has to be said, the rapists were immigrant gangs. And
Pakistani Muslim gangs.
That's right. And of course, Tommy Robinson drew attention to this. So what did they do to Tommy Robinson? They arrested him. They threw him in jail. He's just been arrested again. I think we can see that the Brits are at a point now where they've said, we have tried everything. We have approached the politicians, we've approached local councils, we've protested. Nothing seems to be working. Today there was a big clash between the police and protesters. It's hard to see this not escalating into just a massive conflict in England. I don't think it's necessarily going to resolve what's going on, but what we as Australians need to do is to have a much more responsible immigration policy, which we currently don't have. And let me just say, the best friend of immigrants is a responsible, restrictive immigration policy, and the worst enemy of immigrants is a very relaxed, bad immigration policy, because when you get immigration wrong, that is, when you get the wrong people in the wrong quantities over the wrong period of time, the people who get the blame are always all immigrants as a whole, including the really good ones. So immigrants should be at the front of saying, we want a strict immigration policy. It is in their interests.
Absolutely. And Ben, I want to throw it to you, but firstly, you did send me this story, and I'm glad you did, from Tony Burke and Nick Patterson. Nick Patterson was criticising... James Patterson, who was... Nick Patterson's from Victoria. James Patterson was rightly pointing out that Anthony Albanese's new immigration minister, Tony Burke, who, by the way, happens to have the highest Muslim immigrant population electorate in the country, he's not a fit pick. And this is actually some of the attacks that both him and the Prime Minister had for exactly what the opposition were criticising him for.
To do is to be negative and oppose everything. It's about time James Patterson stood up for the Australian national interest instead of just playing politics.
Yet James Patterson is the one who is clear-eyed when it comes to national security, not Albanese. Tony Burke dutifully followed Albanese by ripping into Patterson this morning, even though it's his own record as Immigration Minister that's now under question.
Can I just say, what an idiotic comment from somebody who's clearly never been a minister and has, he's made up a way of looking at statistics about me. If that's the character of my shadow, then yeah, we'll just deal with what comes at us. I have never hesitated to reject visas or to cancel visas. He'll probably never refer to that statistic because it's just irrefutable if you go back through the records as what I did last time, and the sort of decisions that will happen under my watch again.
And here comes the fact check.
Well, I asked James Patterson to respond to these attacks from Albanese and Tony Burke today, and he told me, I understand why the Prime Minister and Tony Burke are sensitive. I'd be embarrassed too with that record. Burke let in 83 boats carrying 6,600 illegal arrivals in just 80 days as Immigration Minister. Children in detention peaked at 1,992 on his watch. But Australians are entitled to expect a Prime Minister and Minister for Home Affairs who are calm and measured, not who resort to unhinged rants when their record is scrutinised.
All right, Ben, shoot.
Well, it's just projection by Tony Burke, isn't it? And this is a classic thing that Labor always do. They project their failures, they project their inadequacies on somebody who's highly competent, as their opposition and can actually do the job. I mean, and James Patterson just come in and wrecked him. He just come in and wrecked him with the facts. I mean, if you look at what they had to do, is sack 2 complete duds as who are ministers who couldn't even do their jobs and should never have been in the portfolios in the first place, and they've actually then put in someone else who's really only there. I mean, one of the things that James Patterson was questioning is how many of these Palestinians who are fleeing the conflict over there, how many of them are you going to let in and have no security screening or processes for and flood them into the community? Which electorate do you think he's going to put them in? He's going to put them in his own because he's trying to win the favour of the upset large Muslim community there that are not happy with how the handling of the conflict over there has been done. And obviously there are Palestinian people who live there. There are people there of Arab background who sympathise with what's going on over there. Rightfully so. I mean, it's a horrible war, and anyone who's opposing war, look, it's not a bad thing to oppose war, believe me. But what we see from Tony Burke, the whole reason they put him there as immigration minister is because yes, he is going to flood. That's exactly what they're going to do. I see. Look at us. We helped out the Palestinians. We brought them all in, put them in the electorate. He's just trying to save his own skin because he's very concerned about the Islamic backlash from the Islamic community in his own electorate, as all the Labor MPs are. And I speak to people in these communities, and they tell me we're all voting Greens. All the Muslims are saying we're voting Greens. Why are you voting Greens for? They're the only ones who stood up in Parliament and they called it out. And so this is what these Labor Party stooges at headquarters, I think, we're going to change it. We're going to. This is our new game plan to get back in the green books with the Muslims just so they vote for us, and then we'll just treat them like garbage again for the next 3 years. They've dropped the 8 ball here. They don't understand how big this issue has gotten. And if we look at James Patterson's record, James Patterson has done a tremendous job in opposition, and he is held to account. He held to account Claire O'Neill numerous times, and he's a guy of a high calibre who potentially, if he was in the lower house, he could be the Prime Minister one day. And this is the kind of thing that you see. He comes out and does his job and calls out in opposition an incompetent minister who's just been, 2 incompetent ministers who've been removed, and then replaced with another minister who's already failed previously in that portfolio. And what I find astonishing about that is then they have the audacity to project and try and bring it down, which again, it just goes back to, they feel threatened. And that's why they're actually doing it, because they're so frightened that they got caught out. And we saw it too. You see this kind of fear from Labor. They talk the talk and they get up and say all the lovey-dovey stuff and try and project that, their opposition are failures and all that sort of stuff. And then you see in the budget reply speech, Peter Dutton get up and just talk real talk. And you saw the fear on Albanese's face. You saw the fear on that whole front bench. And it was real fear. They were like, oh no, he's going to get up there and he's going to own us. And that's exactly what happened,
There you go. I couldn't say it better than that, guys. I'm going to wrap it up there because you guys do have a long drive tonight, and I really do appreciate you guys coming out, especially on relatively short notice. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to follow any of the guests that are on this panel, these clips will be made available during the week, but you can click the link in the description. I have all the links there with regards to Rumble, YouTube, with regards to all the other social media accounts that I've got, but also these phenomenal panelists that have been kind enough to lend us their time. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Give this a share. If you want to join the army that's actually donating a cup of coffee every month to this, please scan that QR code. There's an opportunity to donate as well. And I've got some very exciting announcements coming in the next few days. I'm excited to share with you guys. But without further ado, guys, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your insights. I do want to do some dedicated podcast with you guys on local councils, and I want to do one definitely with you on Ben on the defence of Australia, and go a lot deeper with perhaps some people to go through the National Strategic Review. And Stephen, we've got to do the fourth turning at some point. I've just finished a phenomenal podcast on that. You've been reading the book. I've got to read the book, but I think as a historian, you've got a lot to weigh in on that. Absolutely.
Can't wait.
Excellent. All right, guys, is there anything you wanted to plug before I turn off these cameras?
Oh, definitely. If you're in Cessnock, vote independent come 14th of September.
Amen. Amen. Good.
People over politics.
God bless you, Quentin. Thank you, Christine. God bless you.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Ben, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. All right, I'll see you guys later. God bless you. Have a good one. As Hoodie says, stay out of the trees. And I'll be back with episode 11 this time next week. Have a good one.